Chapter 11 of King Arthur's Knights. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. King Arthur's Knights, The Tales Retold for Boys and Girls by Henry Gilbert, Chapter 11, of the Plots of Sir Mordred and How Sir Lancelot Saved the Queen. After the quest of the Sangreal was completed, and all the knights that were left alive had returned to the court of King Arthur, there was great joy among the people, and the king and queen Guinevere were passing glad of the remnant that had come home again. Especially did the queen make much of Sir Lancelot and of Sir Bors his cousin, for they were the two most noble and courteous knights of the Round Table, and none thought of them but as men peerless and beyond compare. Sir Mordred, who was the king's nephew, was jealous of the two knights, and went about privily among such knights as were his familiars, and spoke sneering words concerning Sir Lancelot and the queen and Sir Bors. Once Sir Mordred said such words in the hearing of his brother Sir Gawaine, but that knight so heavily and wrathfully took him to task that Sir Mordred knew that Sir Gawaine envied not the two knights and could never be brought to think other than friendly thoughts of them. Therefore Sir Mordred hated the two knights more than ever. Of a slight frame was Mordred, but tall, with dark hair, sallow face, and deep-set grey eyes, beside a thin, long nose. Few loved him, for he was never cheery nor very friendly, and ever seemed to sneer with his thin lips and his cold, wolfish eyes. In a little while strange dark rumours began to go about the court, and it was whispered that so proud had Sir Lancelot become of his fame and prowess, that he harboured evil thoughts against the king, and that he aimed to make a kingdom for himself out of the countries that lay about his own lands of Joyous Gard in the northern marches. Then fresh rumours went about, and these were the most evil of all. It was said that he sought to slay the king, and wished to make Guinevere his own queen, and with her he would rule over all Britain. First men laughed and passed the rumours with a shrug and a gesture of scorn, but when they were repeated again and again, some began to half believe them. Many said that there must be some truth therein, for Sir Lancelot was ever wending his way to the north country, and fought there many battles, and overcame many knights. But others said this was because many ladies and damsels who had lost lands and homes, and been evilly oppressed by the warring barons in those parts, had heard of his great fame for knightly deeds and noble manners, and came beseeching him to be their champion against those who had robbed them. Others said that it was but natural that when he was at the court he should speak much to the queen, for he had from the first vowed himself to be her knight, and many deeds of daring and prowess had he done for her. Yet others there were who believed that what rumour said might be true, and others who were good and noble knights sorrowed to think that such evil thoughts should be spread about by some treacherous tongues. When men came to ask who had set these evil tongues to wag, it was always found that a certain mean knight named Sir Pinel had first spoken wrong of Lancelot and Sir Bors and the queen. And men noticed that it was not long before the queen began to look coldly at Sir Pinel, and then they knew that his rumours had reached her ears. "What profit doth Sir Pinel think to gain from those false tales of her?" said Sir Brastias one day, as he and Sir Gareth came from the hawking together. "For none ever reckoned him as a knight of any merit, and all good men will now think less of him." "I fear me," said Sir Gareth, "that there is more beneath it than what we wot of. Sir Pinel is a bosom friend of Sir Mordred's. Often I have seen their heads together in places apart, and though he is my brother, Sir Mordred is one I cannot love." "What fear you, Gareth?" asked Sir Brastias. "I fear not that he may do," said Gareth, "but I think he hates Sir Lancelot, and he hates Gawaine also, the chief of our party, because he hath roundly told Mordred that he is a traitor, and that he will not be drawn from his firm friendship with Sir Lancelot and his kinsmen. I think Sir Mordred would do much to cause some ill to Gawaine or Sir Lancelot, so long as his own evil body was not hurt." "Sad it is," said Brastias full gloomily, "to think a man of such great kin should harbour hatred and murder against the chief of his kin, and that such should be, methinks, betokens that evil is about to fall upon our famous brotherhood of the Round Table, and on this dear land of Britain." Now it befell that the poor queen had heard, through her maidens, of the rumours concerning herself and Sir Lancelot, and taking counsel of no one, she bethought how she could prove to the remnant of the Round Table that she was free of any plots against the king or the fair kingdom of Britain. She resolved that she would invite the knights to a privy dinner, and when they had eaten, she would throw herself upon their knightly pity and honour, telling them how the evil rumours wronged and hurt her bitterly, and she doubted not that thus their manly sympathy and worship of her, their queen, would by her words cast out the evil effects of the slanderous tales. Therefore, at that dinner she had Sir Gawaine and his brethren, that is to say, Sir Gareth, Sir Agravaine, Sir Gaheris, and Sir Mordred. Also there were the kin of Sir Lancelot, to wit, Sir Bors, Sir Blamor, Sir Bleoberis, Sir Ector de Maris, and Sir Lionel. But Sir Lancelot had gone into the Scottish marches to do battle with a notable robber and oppressor there. There were other knights making in all the number of 24, and these were all the remnant of the 150 that had gone forth in the quest of the Sangreal. Among the guests were Sir Pinel and his cousin, Sir Mador. Now Sir Gawaine had a custom of eating apples, which he used daily at dinner and at supper. He loved all manner of fruit, and in especial a certain brown or russet apple, which was called apple koch. Every one knew of this fondness of Sir Gawaine's, and whoever dined or feasted him took care to provide such apples for his pleasure. The queen had known this, and among the fruit for the table she had ordered such apples to be placed. Now Sir Mordred, as Sir Gareth had suspected, hated Sir Gawaine with a deep hatred, and therefore he had, by crafty dealing, taken all the russet apples from the dish except one, and into this he had thrust a deadly poison. He guessed that, as everyone knew of Sir Gawaine's fondness for that sort of fruit, no one would take it, but would leave it for Sir Gawaine, who would eat it and die thereof. When the feast was near an end, and men laughed and jested together, the dish of fruit was handed round, and Sir Pinel, the mean knight, noticed that there was but one of the apples which Sir Gawaine loved, and to spite that knight, whom he hated, he took that apple ere the dish went to Sir Gawaine. Sir Mordred saw him take it, yet would not cry out to warn his fellow traitor, for this would have revealed himself. He saw Sir Pinel's teeth sink into the brown apple, and Sir Pinel's sneering look as he glanced across at Sir Gawaine, who was searching vainly in the dish for his favourite fruit. Then Sir Mordred saw Sir Pinel's face go red, and then deadly white, and as the poison gripped him, Sir Pinel rose shrieking from the table, crying out that some enemy had poisoned him. Then he sank writhing to the ground, shrieking and moaning, clutching at the ground and at the legs of the chairs. Suddenly, with a great groan, he lay still and was dead. Every knight leaped from the table, ashamed, full of rage and fear, nigh out of their wits but dumb. They looked at each other, and then at the dead Sir Pinel, and all their eyes kept from the face of the queen, where she sat on the high seat with two of her ladies beside her. The reason they could not speak was that they knew the queen had heard of the evil tales which Sir Pinel had spread about her, and that she must have hated him bitterly. And she had made this feast, and had invited him thereto, and now he was dead at the board, by means of deadly poison placed in the food which she had set before him. Then, for very shame, some began to leave the chamber, and others could not bear to look upon the queen, who sat with a face that went now pale, now red. She had seen what happened, and who it was had been slain, and she had read the suspicion in men's gestures. Then the voice of Sir Mador rang out, and checked men from going from the room, and drew all eyes to where he stood, a tall and burly man, red and angry of face and fierce of eyes. "Look!" he cried, and held between his fingers and high above his head the apple which Sir Pinel had bitten. "This is the thing whereof my kinsman Sir Pinel hath lost his life. The matter shall not end here, for I have lost a noble knight of my blood, and I will be revenged to the uttermost." Then turning, he savagely looked at the queen, and with fierce rolling eyes he roared out, "Thou art the murderess! Thou, the queen! Hear me, knights and chieftains! I charge the queen with the murder of my kinsman, Sir Pinel, and justice upon her will I have." Everyone in the hall stood still as if they were of stone. None could gainsay him, none could utter a word on behalf of the queen, for all had suspicion that she had slain Sir Pinel for his slanders of her. Then suddenly the queen rose, white and trembling. "My lords and knights, I did not cause it," she cried in a broken voice. "I am innocent. I know not how it came." And therewith she fell down in a swoon. Sir Mordred's pale face smiled with a bitter sneer. He knew not then whether what had happened would help his evil plots or no, but he resolved to say naught, and so went out with all the other silent knights, whilst the ladies of the queen took her up lamenting, and bore her to her chamber. With the noise and the sorrow that was in the court, King Arthur came and craved to know what was the matter. But none of the silent knights would speak until he met Sir Gawaine, who replied and said, "Sir, the queen did invite us to a privy feast with her, and one of the knights did eat of the fruit on the table, and he is dead by poison. Therefore I dread lest the queen will be shamed for this." King Arthur was passing heavy at the hearing of these words, and went unto the queen to comfort her. On the next day, when the king sat in hall with his 2 court judges, as was his wont daily, to hear any causes or charges which might be brought before him, all men stood with gloomy faces, and there was no laughing and jesting talk, as was usual at this time. Sir Mador came forward and charged the queen of murder, and required that justice should be done upon her. The king heard him with a sad face and in silence. Then he said, "Fair lords and noble knights, heavy is my grief for this, and rather would I give my life for my queen at this moment than that my tongue should frame so evil a charge against my dear wife and your noble queen. But I am here to see that law is done, as justly to the highest as to the lowest. I doubt not that God will soon clear her of this seeming evil." "I know not how that may be," said Sir Mador angrily, "for the evil deed is clear to any man's eyes." "I deem this deed was never done by my queen, nor by her desire," said the king sternly, "but by some traitor that would do her evil and wishes to see her die. But as I am her judge, I may not be her champion and fight against you for her fair fame. I doubt not, however, that some good knight will take this charge upon himself, and put his body in jeopardy for my queen. For if this be not done, dost thou know what is the penalty?" "She must be burnt," said Mador sullenly, "but she hath done the deed, and will merit the doom." "Cease, hasty man," said King Arthur sternly. "It goeth to my heart to hear ye pronounce the doom thou wouldst visit upon that fair lady. Fear not, Sir Mador, she shall find some good knight to do combat for her. Therefore do thou name thy day of battle." "But hark ye, lord," said Sir Mador, "there is none of the 24 knights that were bidden to this dinner that hath not suspicion of the queen for this deed. Therefore no knight can take this charge upon him in her behalf. What say ye, my lords?" He turned to the silent, moody men about the dais. The knights looked troubled, and were dumb for some moments. But at last Sir Gawaine said, "We cannot excuse the queen, for she gave the feast, and either the poison came by her will or by her servants." But most of the knights were silent, and Sir Bors and his kindred were very sorrowful. King Arthur was heavy at the words of Sir Gawaine. "Now, king," cried Sir Mador triumphantly, "I require ye, as ye be a righteous king, give me a day that I may have justice." "That will I do," said the king, "as I must do that am a just king. I give you this day 15 days, that ye be ready armed on horseback in the meadow beside the wall at London. And if it so fall out that there be a knight to encounter with you, then God speed the right, and if there be no knight to take arms for my queen, then must she suffer by fire." So sorrowful were the king's words that many knights had much ado to keep from weeping. "And meanwhile," said Sir Mador, "I do require that ye keep the queen in close ward in prison, lest any try a rescue, and thus defeat the justice that is my due." Though it went to the king's heart to have to order this, he gave the queen into the keeping of Sir Kay, who kept her in her chamber, guarded by 3 knights, to the great grief of her women and all the court. Then the queen sent for Sir Bors, and when he was come, she threw herself on her knees full piteously before him, and wept sorely, and begged that he would save her from this dreadful death. "For by my confession unto heaven," she cried, "I know not of this wicked deed how it was brought about, and will ye not take this combat upon ye for my sake? For I am sure if your kinsman, Sir Lancelot, was here, he would not suffer this evil suspicion to lie against me, for he hath ever been my most faithful knight, but now I am without friend in this great pass."
"Madam," replied Sir Bors, "what can I do? For if I take this charge upon me for your sake, men will say I was your aider in this crime that they charge upon you. And I see not how I may fight for you except by endangering my own life without saving yours. But I tell ye, madam, what I will do. I will hasten with all speed to the north, trusting in God to get news of Sir Lancelot, so that I may tell him and bring him here within the time appointed."
"Ah, good Sir Bors," cried the queen, and clasped his hands, "do ye do that, for I know that Sir Lancelot will never believe me guilty of so great a crime. And I will pray hourly that ye find him, and bring him to me in time, so that my poor body be not unjustly given to the dreadful flames." Forthwith Sir Bors armed himself, and with 2 squires set forth instantly, and sent his men in different ways, so that among the 3 they should not fail to hear where in the northern marches a knight so famous as Sir Lancelot might be found. No rest did the good Sir Bors give to himself, but swiftly did he ride hither and thither, questioning all knights whom he met, and inquiring of every hermitage and abbey and at every harbourage. Finally, when 11 days had passed of the 15, he found Sir Lancelot lying wounded at a broken abbey, from which, in a fierce fight, he had but 2 days before thrust out a band of pagans who would have murdered the nuns and robbed the church of its holy relics. Full wroth was Sir Lancelot when, having lovingly greeted each other, Sir Bors told him all that had passed with the queen. "The foul traitors!" he cried, and getting fiercely from the pallet on which he lay, he strode up and down the chamber, clenching his hands and gnashing his teeth. "Do any dare to suspect her? Do any think in cold blood to see that peerless lady bound to the stake, the flames devouring her noble person? That men should think such things, and move not a hand in noble wrath, shows how evil are the days in which we live." Then he rushed from the room, wounded as he was, and full of a cold wrath. He ordered his arms to be brought and his horse to be saddled, and to the gentle persuasions of the nuns he said he must be gone, for he must stay a wrong that, if suffered, would sink the kingdom in unquenchable shame and ruin. Then, with Sir Bors, he rode southwards, full fiercely, and never resting to eat, but taking food as he rode. At night he would not doff his armour, but slept beside his horse, and seldom spoke, but was consumed as by a great fire of anger. And on the 14th day they rode into London. "Go beg the queen to see me," he said to Sir Bors. Sir Bors went, and Sir Lancelot strode into an hostelry to wash from himself the stains of travel, and to don a fitting robe in which to appear before the queen. Now it had befallen, while Sir Bors had been absent from the court seeking for Sir Lancelot, that Sir Mordred and Sir Gawaine had made a plot with each other against him and against Sir Lancelot, and they caused it to be noised in all the court that Sir Bors had gone to seek Sir Lancelot, and that Sir Bors was privy to the plots which Sir Lancelot and the queen had made to wrest the kingdom from King Arthur, and to reign together in his stead. They said that Sir Bors had gone to warn Sir Lancelot that the time was ripe to strike. Wherefore many knights were greatly displeased to hear this news. But some would not believe it, and said that Sir Bors had gone to tell Sir Lancelot of the jeopardy in which the queen's life was placed, and to ask him to do battle for her. "But," said some, "if he do not find Sir Lancelot, it is his intention to do combat for the queen himself, and that is great wrong in Sir Bors, for he was with us at the feast, and none but she could have caused that poison." Daily the party which inclined to Sir Mordred and Sir Gawaine gained power, and some were for going to tell the king of the evil designs which Sir Lancelot and Sir Bors and the queen had against his person and the kingdom. But Sir Mordred said, "No, the time is not yet ripe. Wait a while." The guard that was set about the queen's chamber was doubled, and all were knights that were well willers to the plots of Sir Mordred and Sir Gawaine. When therefore Sir Bors came and asked to see the queen, they let him go to her, But Sir Agravaine hid himself and listened to all that passed between Sir Bors and the queen. Then he went and told the others that Sir Lancelot was waiting to speak to the queen, and he counselled that they should let him come, and then, when he came forth again, as he would be unarmed, they could fall upon him and capture him and take him before the king and charge him with his treason and his plots. And with the consent of Sir Mordred, this was so agreed, and he advised that most of them should hide from before the door, so that Sir Lancelot should not think the guard was strong. "For," said Sir Mordred, "if he sees there is no great watch kept, he may strive to free the queen, and when we take him it will be blacker against him." When therefore Sir Bors came forth from his audience with the queen, he found but one knight at the door, and that was Sir Petipace of Winchelsea, a young man. Sir Bors wondered why the guard of 10 or 12 that had been there before was now gone, and he was uneasy in his mind. Going to Sir Lancelot, he told him that the queen would see him at once. "But," added Sir Bors, "ye shall not go this night by my counsel, nor should you go before there are more of our kinsmen near us to aid us in case of need." "Why?" said Sir Lancelot. "Sir," said Sir Bors, "I misdoubt me of Sir Agravaine and Sir Mordred. There was a great watch before the door of the queen's room when I entered, but when I came hence there was but one, and I mistrust them that stood there, for all were of Sir Mordred's evil company, and peradventure they lay some snare for you, and I dread me sore of treachery." "Have ye no doubt," said Sir Lancelot, "for I shall go and come again and make no tarrying."
"Sir," replied his cousin, "that me sore repenteth. But if you will, I will go and seek some of our kinsmen to meet us near by, and do you not go until I have found them."
"Nay, I will not stay," said Sir Lancelot, "and I marvel me much why ye say this, for they dare do naught against me."
"God speed you well," said Sir Bors, "if that is your will, and send you safe and sound again."
Sir Lancelot departed, taking his sword underneath his arm, while Sir Bors went forth to find some of their kin. He learned, however, that many of them had gone forth with the king to punish a bandit lord in the forest of the Weald, and would not return before the morrow, when the combat should be held for the queen. Sir Lancelot came to the door of the queen's prison, and found Sir Petipace there, and demanded to be let in to see the queen. "We thought you were in the north, Sir Lancelot," said the young knight with a laugh, "and surely it will pleasure our lady queen to see you." He unlocked the door of the queen's antechamber, and told her waiting women that Sir Lancelot would see the queen, and in a few moments Sir Lancelot was let in. The sorrowing queen told him all that had happened, and how, and he was wroth to think that anyone should suspect her of so great a crime. He promised that on the day appointed he would fight for her with all his strength, as a true knight should, and God would defend the right. Suddenly, as they spoke together, there came loud voices crying outside the chamber door, "Traitor knight, Sir Lancelot du Lake, now art thou taken in thy treachery." Sir Lancelot knew that the voices were those of Sir Agravaine, who had ever been envious of him, and of Sir Mordred, whom no one loved. He went quickly to the door and barred it with the beam, and bade the terrified queen not to be alarmed. He asked her whether there was any armour in the room, which he could put on to defend himself. "I have none," she said, weeping sorely. "Wherefore I dread me sore that evil will come to you, my true and valiant knight. For I hear by their noise there be many strong knights. Wherefore ye are like to be slain soon, and then shall I surely burn." "Alas," said Sir Lancelot, "in all my life was I never in such a pass to be slain for lack of my armour." "Traitor knight," cried those that were hammering at the door with the handles of their swords, "come out at once, and skulk there no more, for know ye well thou art so beset thou shalt not escape." Sir Lancelot went to the queen, and kneeling to her, took her hand and kissed it, saying, "Madam, I beseech you to pray for my soul if I be slain. I have been your true knight with all my power up to this time, and now I will not fail you if I may. But if I be slain, I am assured that my kinsman Sir Bors, and all the others of my kin, will not suffer you to go to the fire." Then Sir Lancelot, leaving the weeping queen, wrapped his mantle around his left arm as if it were a shield, and prepared to sell his life dearly. By this time the knights outside had got a bench from the hall, and using it as a battering ram were dashing it against the door to beat it in.
"Leave your noise, fair lords," rang out the voice of Lancelot, "and I will open the door to ye, and then ye may do to me what ye will." "Do it then," they cried, "and we will give you your life until we take thee to King Arthur to be judged for your treason." Sir Lancelot unbarred the door and held it open a little way, so that one knight only might enter at a time. One entered, a big, slow man named Sir Colgreve, and swiftly Sir Lancelot slammed the door and fastened it to keep the others out. Sir Colgreve turned and struck at Sir Lancelot, but the latter put the stroke lightly aside with his sword, and gave so swift and keen a blow upon the other's helm that Sir Colgreve fell down dead. Then, while the others hammered and yelled outside the door, Sir Lancelot swiftly took off the armour of the dead knight, and with the help of the queen and her waiting women was armed in it. Again the knights outside had begun to dash at the door to beat it down. Sir Lancelot, when he was armed, strode to it and cried out, "Let be your noise, and go away, for ye shall not prison me this night. And I promise ye by my knighthood that I will appear tomorrow before the king, and then such of ye as dare may accuse me of treason, and I will then prove that I am a true man and no traitor."
"Fie on thee, false traitor!" cried Sir Agravaine and Sir Mordred. "But we will have thee this night and slay thee."
"Then, sirs," replied Sir Lancelot, "if ye will not take my counsel, look well to yourselves." With that, Sir Lancelot threw the door open suddenly, and while the others struggled and tripped over the bench between them, he had run 2 of them through. Then, in that narrow antechamber, there was as fierce a fight as ever brave knight might wish to see. Sir Mordred, from behind, urged on the others with evil words, telling them to slay Sir Lancelot, while he launched at that knight all manner of foul names. Fiercely did Sir Lancelot fight, for he was full of rage, and as in the narrow place in which he stood no more than 2 could come at him at once, he could not be overwhelmed by their numbers. There were 10 of them, and so full of force were his blows, and so skilful his thrusts, that in a little while 7 lay slain, 2 were badly wounded, and the last, who was Sir Mordred, barely escaped with his life, and bore a deep wound with him. Sir Lancelot, sorely wounded, returned to the queen and said, "Madam, I know not what is this treason with which they charge me, but I doubt not it will go ill with me, for I have killed many of the kin of the king and of Sir Gawaine this night, and I misdoubt me that the king himself will be my foe also. Nevertheless, I will save you, if it is in my power, from the danger that threatens you." "Go ye, Sir Lancelot," the queen besought him, "ere the men-at-arms come, which are so many ye may never hope to escape them. I dread me sorely that much ill will come of this, and of the evil plots which our enemies weave about us." Then kneeling, Sir Lancelot kissed the queen's hand and went from the prison, and the people who had assembled outside at the noise of the fighting wondered to see only one knight issue forth, his armour dented and broken, and dabbled here and there with the blood of his wounds. Sir Lancelot took his way to the lodging of Sir Bors, who showed his great gladness to see him again, and when he had been unarmed and his wounds staunched and bound, Sir Lancelot told him what had befallen him. "And now I beseech you," said Sir Lancelot, "be of good heart in whatever great need we stand, for now I fear war must come of it all. But what is the treason they would charge me with I know not, yet I dread it meaneth much evil plotting against me and the peace of this fair kingdom."
"Sir," said Sir Bors, "your enemies, and those that envy your great fame, have spread many evil reports about you. They say that you plot to slay the king, and to take Queen Guinevere to wife, to reign over this kingdom with you." With that, Sir Lancelot was so astounded that for some moments he could not speak. Then he said, "By my confession unto heaven, this is as foul a plot against me as ever fiend could fashion. And it showeth how far they will go to pull me down and dishonour me. And doth the king know of these evil rumours?" "I know not," replied Sir Bors, "but I doubt not that Sir Mordred will not rest his horse till he hath found the king and poisoned his mind against thee."
"Had I known of this," said Sir Lancelot, "I would have brought the queen away with me and put her in a safe place, for now I know that her enemies and mine will not rest until she and I be slain." But Sir Bors counselled him not to attempt a rescue then, for day was breaking, the town was awake, and the court would be full of the armed retainers of the slain knights. Then, while Sir Lancelot rested himself,
Sir Bors went out to the lodgings of such of his kinsmen as might not be gone with the king, and he found that now all had returned to London with the king, that Sir Mordred had met them on their way, and had told King Arthur of the fight, and had, moreover, charged Sir Lancelot and the queen with conspiring together to gain the crown. Sad indeed was Sir Bors to hear this, but going about the town he got together the kinsmen of Sir Lancelot and such of his friends as would cast in their lot with him in so weighty and terrible a thing as civil war. By 7 of the clock he had got together good and valiant knights to the number of 80, all horsed and armed. Then he told them to betake themselves to a privy place in a wood beyond the city walls to the north, and there in a little while came Sir Lancelot with Sir Bors and held counsel with them. He told them all that had befallen him in the fight with the 12 knights, and they in their turn related how Sir Mordred had met them and had told his evil tales against the queen and Lancelot, and how for long the king was too wroth and too sad to listen. But afterwards, when Sir Mordred told how Sir Pinel, who had spoken of these things, had been poisoned at the feast given by the queen, King Arthur had wept, and then was very stern and quiet, and said no word more. "Now, my lords," said Sir Lancelot, when they had done speaking, "ye know well how evil are these plots, how baseless are these foul rumours against me. But now they have been launched against me, and I have slain men on account of them. I fear we shall be hard put to it to get peace again. Those men were set on to betray me, and I doubt not mine enemies will have the queen burnt, to revenge themselves upon her and upon me. Therefore, fair lords, what counsel do ye give?"
"Sir," said Sir Bors, when they had spoken together a little, "we think there is but one thing to be done first, that ye nightly rescue the queen, if your enemies force the king to put her to the stake. For if she be burnt, then it would be to your shame, seeing that you vowed yourself her true knight when she came, a young fair bride, to our king 20 years agone. And in whatsoever way ye would rescue her, ye may count upon us to our last breath." With a great shout, all the other knights raised their right hands in the air and cried, "Yea! Yea!" Then, by the advice of Sir Lancelot, they kept hidden in the little wood, while one went into the city to learn what was being done, and in what manner the queen was to be treated. Meanwhile, in the hall of the palace of King Arthur, men sat or stood with anxious looks, glancing in silence at the king as he walked up and down apart, with a stern look on his face. Then Sir Mador strode forward and said, "Lord, I do require you to perform your promise to me, to wit, that the queen be brought to the stake, unless one be found to do combat on her behalf." "What I have promised I will fulfill," said the king, and men sorrowed to see how heavy of anguish were his looks, and full of sorrow his words. "Lord King," said Sir Mordred, "we have shamefully suffered much wrong at the hands of Sir Lancelot. I appeal to thee that he be seized, so that the kin of those whom he slew this last night may have vengeance upon him." Then came Sir Gawaine forward quickly, and his face was dark with anger, and his words hot. "Lord," he cried, "listen not to such tales, for I doubt not it was only by evil plots that Sir Lancelot was forced to slay those whom he slew, for I trust not Sir Mordred." "So God us help," said Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, "we too will not be known to be of the same mind as our brother Sir Mordred." "Then will I do as I deem it best to gain what I deem right," replied Sir Mordred. "I believe thou wilt do it in thine own hidden ways," said Sir Gawaine, and looked fiercely at his brother. "For in all unhappiness and evil thou art to be found, if men but seek in the darkest place and look for the most secret foe."
"I appeal to you, lord," said Sir Mordred to the king, "to proclaim Sir Lancelot a false traitor to you and to your realm."
"And I," said Sir Gawaine, "will bid ye remember, Lord King, that if ye will make war between us and Sir Lancelot, there will be many kings and great lords hold with him. And I would ask you, how many times hath Sir Lancelot done noble deeds on our behalf, and proved himself the best knight of us all? Did he not rescue 20 of us from the dungeons of Sir Turquine? Hath he not avenged shame upon the king and the queen and the fame of the Round Table many a time?
Methinketh, my uncle, that such kind deeds should be well remembered. Think ye, said the king, that I am not loath to begin so evil and terrible a thing as civil war? Man, it rendeth my heart to think it, and I tell thee, Sir Mordred, I will not begin it, except I have proofs of what ye charge upon Sir Lancelot. And as he is the best knight of ye all, and the most valiant, I will not judge him before I hear him. If I know him well, he will come hither and challenge the knight to combat that doth bring these charges against him, and in that will I trust, for God shall surely defend the right. Therefore, let a messenger be sent to Sir Lancelot, requiring him, by his knighthood, to appear before me here, and make answer to the charges thou hast against him. This was not as Sir Mordred desired, for he did not doubt that if Sir Lancelot came he would have little trouble to persuade the king that he was innocent. When the messenger was gone, therefore, Sir Mordred sent a servant after him, who slew him in a wood and hid his body under a bush. Meanwhile Sir Mordred counselled Sir Mador to repeat his demand that the king should cause the queen to be led to the stake, since no knight had come forward and offered to fight for her. For a time the king put him off, hoping that as soon as Sir Lancelot received his commands he would come instantly. Very anxiously did the king look to the door, hoping to see the tall form of his best knight come towering through the hall. Instead thereof came the crafty servant of Sir Mordred, throwing himself at the feet of the king.
"Gracious lord,"
cried he, panting as if from swift running,
"I have, even now, come from the place where Sir Lancelot and his friends are hiding. I am one of their servants, but I hate their treason against ye, and therefore I am come to tell you of this greatest treason of all. They have slain your messenger, my lord, him that came requiring Sir Lancelot to appear before thee. Sir Lancelot ran upon him when he gave his message, and slew him, saying, 'Thus do I answer the saucy words of him who shall not much longer be king.'" The king looked at the face of the messenger long and sadly. The pain which the king suffered would have softened any ordinary heart, but the murderer was a hard and callous wretch, and his brazen eyes outlooked the king. "Then is Sir Lancelot changed indeed," said the king, and walked away with bowed head and moist eyes. Sir Mador pushed forward again, repeating his demand. "Have it as ye will," said the king heavily, and went quickly into his private chamber. "Alas," said Sir Gawaine and Sir Gareth, "now is the whole realm falling to ruin, and the noble fellowship of the Round Table shall be scattered in civil war." Soon a page came to Sir Gawaine, telling him that the king would speak to him. "Gawaine," said the king, when the knight went to him, "I have been too easy with this knight, Sir Lancelot. He hath slain 11 knights of the Round Table, and my messenger. The pride and ambition of that man shall have a check. His great fame for valiant deeds hath made him mad, until it would seem that nothing but this realm will content him. Now therefore, as justice demands, and Sir Mador requires, do ye lead the queen to the fire. She shall have the law as is right. Afterwards we will see Sir Lancelot, and know ye, he shall have a hard and shameful death." "Heaven forbid," said Sir Gawaine, "that ever I should see either of these things, for I will believe not these reports of Sir Lancelot." "How now?" said the king. "Truly ye have little cause to love him. This night last past he slew Sir Agravaine, your brother, and several of your kindred with him, and also, Sir Gawaine, remember how he slew but lately 2 sons of yours in battle against the oppressing lords of the borders." "My lord," said Sir Gawaine, "I know these things, and for their deaths I have grieved. But I warned them all, and as they sought their deaths wilfully, I will not avenge them, nor think worse of Sir Lancelot." "Nevertheless," said the king, "I pray you will make ready with your brothers, Sir Gaheris and Sir Gareth, to take the queen to the fire, there to have her judgment and receive her death." "Nay, most noble lord," replied the knight sadly, "that will I never do. I will never stand by to see so noble a queen meet so shameful a death." "Then," said the king sadly,
Suffer your brothers Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris to be there." "They are younger than I," replied Sir Gawaine, "and they may not say you nay." The king commanded the 2 brothers of Sir Gawaine to come to him, and told them what he desired of them. "Sir," said Sir Gareth, "it is in your power to command us to lead the queen to her shameful end, but wit you well it is sore against our will. We will go as ye bid, but it shall be in peaceable guise, for we tell you straightway we will not oppose a rescue should any so desire." "Alas," said Sir Gawaine, and wept, "that ever I should live to see this woeful day." Then the 2 knights went to the queen, and sorrowfully bade her prepare for her death. Very pale was the queen, but very quiet.
For now that this was come, which she had dreaded night and day,
she would bear herself proudly like a queen, innocent as she knew she was of any crime. Her ladies dressed her in her meanest garments. A priest, her confessor, was brought to her, and she was shriven of her sins. Then arose a weeping and a wailing and a wringing of hands among the lords and ladies. Between the knights and the men-at-arms she was led through the streets to the lists beyond the wall. Lamentation, cries of horror, and the shrieks and sighs of women arose from the multitude which lined each side of the narrow streets. Many were the prayers that rose from white lips, praying God to send a miracle to rescue so sweet a lady from so dreadful a doom. The city apprentices, with stout sticks in their hands, stood in bands, and in their stout young hearts was a great rage. It was in their minds to dash upon the guard of armoured knights, to attempt a rescue, but they knew how vain their sticks would be against the keen blades of swords. So stricken with horror were all those that looked on, that they noticed not how, when the queen and her guard issued from the gates of the palace, a man in the coarse dress of a peasant, who was standing in the crowd, strode swiftly away down a narrow lane. There he vaulted with an unpeasant-like deftness upon a good steed that stood in the charge of a young lad, and striking spurs in the horse's flanks, he dashed away madly along the streets and through the northern gate into the fields. Amidst the sorrowing people, with women crying and men muttering and looking darkly at the knights about her, the queen was led to the tilting ground beyond the northern wall, and in the midst thereof was a stake. To this she was fastened with a rope, and faggots of wood were piled about her feet up to her knees. Near her stood the priest of her household, trying to cheer her with comforting words. But the queen, pale and without tears, seemed to be dazed as if she did not hear him. 100 knights ranged themselves behind the queen, some on horseback, but the most on foot. Many of them had followed the example of Sir Gaheris and Sir Gareth, and stood without arms. But Sir Mador was on his horse, fully armed and prepared for combat. Others of his kindred rode beside him. Then Sir Gaheris called upon the herald to proclaim what the king had commanded. "In the name of the king," cried the herald, "the queen hath been found guilty of the death of a knight by treason and poison, and his kinsmen have demanded due judgment upon her. But if any knight shall take upon himself to do battle for her, let him appear instantly. If none do appear, then shall she suffer the death by burning, as the law doth appoint." The herald ceased. The people in the seats, craning this way and that, looked eagerly up and down the lists to see if any knight came. They saw Sir Mador in the forefront of the troop of mounted knights glance about him, but no armed man moved forward to do battle for the innocence of the queen. Then he looked to where she stood, pale and still, and men saw him smile faintly, as if his cruel heart already rejoiced to think that she would surely burn. A great stillness was on the multitude of people. The eyes of all the citizens of London were bent upon that long, wide space of sand within the lists. Many, blurred by tears, could not bear to look at the white figure in the midst of the faggots. Men and women held their breath. They saw Sir Mador look towards Sir Gaheris, as if to ask him why he delayed giving the signal for the executioner to go forward to do his duty. Sir Gaheris stood looking down the lists toward the great entrance. His brother, Sir Gareth, was beside him, and in the hearts of both were prayers which asked that something might happen to prevent them doing this dreadful deed upon their fair queen. "I do call upon you, Sir Gaheris, to fulfill the law." Sir Mador's harsh voice rang out in the silence, startling all.
With the sound, Sir Gaheris threw up his hands in a gesture of despair. He turned to the executioner, who stood beside a cauldron of fire, and pointed to the queen. Horror held the great multitude in silence, and all eyes watched the man put his torch in the fire and then carry it blazing towards the faggots. Suddenly, the men heard a strange throbbing sound, as if from a distance. Then quickly it changed into the fierce beat of horses' hoofs, and before many could realize what it meant, through the great gate at the end of the lists dashed knights in armor, on horses whose foam-flecked trappings showed at what a speed they had come. At the head of them rode a great knight, and as men caught the device upon his shield, a great roar of gladness burst from the throats of the people, while women sobbed for joy. "Sir Lancelot! Sir Lancelot to the rescue!" was the cry. As the knights entered, Sir Mador's quick command sounded, and the knights about him ran forward and surrounded the queen. They had barely reached the place when, with a great crashing sound, the party of Sir Lancelot was upon them. Many of Sir Mador's people were at once thrown headlong to the ground by the force of the shock, but the others fought fiercely. This way and that the battle swayed, Sir Mador trying to thrust the others from the fire, and Sir Lancelot's kinsmen striving to reach the queen. All was in confusion. The knights on foot were mingled with those on horseback, and many were cut down who did not bear arms. Full of a mad wrath was Sir Lancelot, as he raged among the knights that stood about the faggots, nor could any withstand him. So blind was he in his fury that he knew not whom he slew, except that they were men who stood between him and the queen. So, by great mischance, at this rushing and hurtling, he slew 2 knights, and knew not that they were unarmed, and that they were of those he loved most. One was Sir Gareth, whom he had himself knighted, and the other was Sir Gaheris. In very truth Sir Lancelot knew them not, and afterwards they were found dead where the corpses lay thickest. Short but very fierce was that battle, for none could long withstand the fury of Sir Lancelot and his kinsmen. Many were slain on both sides. Sir Mador had his head sheared from his shoulders by a stroke of Sir Lancelot's sword, and the remnant of his party fled. Then Sir Lancelot rode to the queen, cut her bonds, and lifted her upon his horse full tenderly. Her eyes streamed with tears as she returned thanks to God for her deliverance, and hardly could she tell her gratitude to Sir Lancelot. Thus, with the continued praises of the people in his ears, Sir Lancelot fared forth amidst his kinsmen, and taking the road northwards, he rode with the queen to his own castle of Joyous Gard. "For," said he, "I will keep the queen in safety until I know that the king is assured of our innocence of any treason against him. But I doubt our enemies have poisoned his mind, for never else would he have suffered her to go to the stake." But therein was Sir Lancelot in great error, as in much grief and remorse he came later to see. For if instantly he had taken the queen to the king, and had dared his enemies to prove his treason and the queen's, they would have been instantly discountenanced, and King Arthur would have known and loved him as he had ever done, for a true knight and a peerless one. Nevertheless, Sir Lancelot would ever have had the hatred of Sir Gawaine, which was caused by his slaying, though unwittingly, the 2 good knights Sir Gaheris and Sir Gareth, whereof came great bale and sorrow. End of chapter 11. Recording by Tamara Schwartz, Newburgh, Oregon. Chapter 12 of King Arthur's Knights. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. King Arthur's Knights, The Tales Retold for Boys and Girls, by Henry Gilbert. Chapter 12 of Sir Gawaine's Hatred and the War with Sir Lancelot. King Arthur, in the hall of his palace in London, walked quickly up and down, thinking in great grief of the death of his queen. A group of pages stood quietly in the shadow by the door, and 2 or 3 knights gazed silently at the moody king. Suddenly there came the sound of running footsteps. A man dashed into the hall and threw himself at the feet of the king. It was a squire of Sir Mordred's, and he craved leave to speak. "Say on," said the king. "My lord," said the man,
Sir Lancelot hath rescued the queen from the fire, and hath slain some 30 of your knights. And he and his kin have taken the queen among them away to some hiding place." King Arthur stood for a little while, dumb for pure sorrow. Then turning away, he wrung his hands and cried with a voice whose sadness pierced every heart, "Alas, that I ever bear a crown! For now is the fairest fellowship of knights that ever the world held scattered and broken." "Further, my lord," went on the man, as others came into the hall, "Sir Lancelot hath slain the brethren of Sir Gawaine, and they are Sir Gaheris and Sir Gareth." The king looked from the man to the knights that now surrounded him, as if that which he heard was past all belief. "Is this truth?" he asked them, and all were moved at the sorrow on his face and in his voice. "Yea, lord," said they. "Then, fair fellows," he said very heavily, "I charge you that no man tell Sir Gawaine of the death of his 2 brothers, for I am sure that when he heareth that his loved younger brother, Sir Gareth, is slain, he will nigh go out of his mind for sorrow and anger." The king strode up and down the chamber, wringing his hands in the grief he could not utter. "Why, oh, why did he slay them?" he cried out at length. "He himself knighted Sir Gareth when he went to fight the oppressor of the Lady Lions, and Sir Gareth loved him above all others." "That is truth," said some of the knights, and could not keep from tears to see the king's grief. "But they were slain in the hurtling together of the knights, as Sir Lancelot dashed in the thick of the press. He wist not whom he smote, so blind was his rage to get to the queen at the stake." "Alas, alas," said the king, "the death of them will cause the greatest woeful war that ever was in this fair realm. I see ruin before us all. Rent and ruined shall we be, and all peace for ever at an end." Though the king had forbidden any of his knights to tell Sir Gawaine of the death of his 2 brothers, Sir Mordred called his squire aside, and bade him go and let Sir Gawaine know all that had happened. "Do you see to it," he told the man, "that thou dost inflame his mind against Sir Lancelot." The knave went to Sir Gawaine and found him walking on the terrace of the palace overlooking the broad, quiet Thames, where the small trading ships sailed up and down the river on their ways to and from Gaul and the ports of the Kentish coast. "Sir," said the squire, doffing his cap and bowing, "great and woeful deeds have been toward this day. The queen hath been rescued by Sir Lancelot and his kin, and some 30 knights were slain in the melee about the stake." "Heaven defend my brethren," said Sir Gawaine, "for they went unarmed. But as for Sir Lancelot, I guessed he would try a rescue, and I had deemed him no man of knightly worship if he had not. But tell me, how are my brethren? Where be they?" "Alas, sir," said the man, "they be slain." The grim face of Sir Gawaine went pale, and with an iron hand he seized the shoulder of the squire and shook him in his rage. "Have a care, thou limb of Mordred's, if thou speakest lies," he said. "I would not have them dead for all this realm and its riches. Where is my young brother, Sir Gareth?" "Sir, I tell ye truth," said the man, "for I know how heavy would be your anger if I lied in this. Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris are slain, and all good knights are mourning them, and in especial the king our master." Sir Gawaine took a step backwards, and his face went pale, and then it darkened with rage. "Tell me who slew them," he thundered. "Sir," replied the man, "Sir Lancelot slew them both." "False knave!" cried Sir Gawaine. "I knew thou didst lie." He struck the man a great buffet on the head, so that he fell half dazed to the ground. "Ha, ha, thou lying tale-bearer!" laughed Sir Gawaine, half relieved of his fears, yet still half doubtful. "To tell me that Sir Lancelot slew them? Why, man, knowest thou of whom thou pratest? Sir Lancelot to slay my dear young brother Gareth?
Why, man, Gareth loved Sir Lancelot as he loved me, not more than he loved me, but near as much, and Sir Lancelot was ever proud of him. 'Twas he that knighted my young brother Gareth, brave and hardy, noble of mind and goodly of look. He would have stood with Lancelot against the king himself, so greatly he loved him. And thou foul mouth, thou tellest me that Lancelot hath slain him? Begone from my sight, thou split tongue.
Nevertheless, Sir Gawaine, said the man, rising, Sir Lancelot slew them both in his rage, as he would, saving your presence, have slain you had you stood between him and the queen at the stake.
At these words, stubbornly spoken in spite of the furious looks of Sir Gawaine, the knight realized that the man was speaking the truth. His look was fixed on the face of the knave, and rage and grief filled his eyes as he grasped the fact that his beloved brother was really slain. Then the blood surged into his face, and he dashed away. Men started to see the wild figure of Sir Gawaine rushing through the passages, his eyes bloodshot, his face white. At length he dashed into the presence of the king. Arthur stood sorrowing amidst his knights, but Sir Gawaine rushed through them and faced the king. "Ha! King Arthur!" he cried, half breathless, but in a great wild voice. "My good brother Sir Gareth is slain, and also Sir Gaheris. I cannot bear the thought of them slain. It cannot be true. I cannot believe it." "Nay, nor can any think upon it," said the king, "and keep from weeping." Aye, said Sir Gawaine in a terrible voice. "There shall be weeping, I trow, and that ere long. Sir, I will go see my dead brothers. I would kiss them ere they be laid in earth." "Nay, that may not be," said the king gently. "I knew how great would be thy sorrow, and that sight of them would drive thee mad, and I have caused them to be interred instantly." "Tell me," said Gawaine, and men marveled to see the wild look in his eyes and to hear the fierce voice. "Is it truth that Sir Lancelot slew them both?" "It is thus told me," said the king, "that in his fury Sir Lancelot knew not whom he smote." "But, man," thundered Sir Gawaine, "they bear no arms against him. Their hearts were with him, and young Gareth loved him, as if Lancelot was his own brother." I know it," replied King Arthur, "but men say they were mingled in the thick press of the fight, and Lancelot knew not friend from foe, but struck down all that stood between him and the queen." For a space Sir Gawaine was silent, and men looked upon him with awe and compassion. His mane of hair, grizzled and wild, was thrown back upon his shoulders, and his eyes flamed with a glowing light as of fire. Suddenly he stepped up to the king, and lifting his right hand said, in a voice that trembled with rage, "My lord, my king, and my uncle, wit you well that now I make oath by my knighthood, that from this day I will seek Sir Lancelot, and never rest till he be slain or he slay me. Therefore, my lord king, and you, my fellow knights and lords, I require you all to prepare yourselves for war. For, know you, though I ravage this land and all the lands of Christendom, I will not rest me nor slake my revenge until I come up to Lancelot and drive my sword into his evil heart." With that Sir Gawaine strode from the room, and for a space all men were silent, so fierce and full of hatred had been his words. "I see well," said the king, "that the death of these twain knights will cause the deadliest war that hath ever raged, and never shall we have rest until Gawaine do slay Lancelot or is slain by him. O Lancelot, Lancelot, my peerless knight, that ever thou shouldst be the cause of the ruin of this my fair kingdom!"
none that heard the king could keep from tears, and many felt that in this quarrel the king's heart was not set, except for the sake of Sir Gawaine, his nephew, and all his kin. Then there were made great preparations in London, and all the lands south of Trent, with sharpening of swords and spears, making of harness, and beating of smiths' hammers on anvils. Men's minds were in sore distress, and the faces of the citizens were long and white with dismay. Daily the quarrel caused other quarrels. Many a group of knights came to high words, some taking the side of Lancelot and the queen, and others that of the king and Sir Gawaine. Often they came to blows, and one or other of their number would be left writhing and groaning on the ground. Families broke up in bad blood by reason of it, for the sons would avow their intent to go and enlist with Lancelot, while the fathers, in high anger at such disloyalty to Arthur, would send their tall sons away, bidding them never to look upon their faces again. Women sorrowed and wept, for whichever side they took, it meant that one or other of their dear ones was opposed to them, and would go to battle, fighting against those of their own kin and of their own hearths. Towards midsummer the host was ready, and took the road to the north. The quarrel had been noised abroad throughout Britain, and many kings, dukes, and barons came to the help of Arthur, so that his army was a great multitude. Yet many others had gone to Lancelot, where he lay in his castle of Joyous Gard, not far from Carlisle. Thither, in the month of July, when the husbandmen were looking to their ripening fields and thinking of harvest, King Arthur and Sir Gawaine drew with their army and laid a siege against the castle of Joyous Gard, and against the walled town which it protected. But for all their engines of war, catapults which threw great stones, and ramming irons which battered the walls, they could not make a way into the place, and so lay about it until harvest time. One day, as Queen Guinevere stood at the window of the castle, she looked down at the tents of the besieging host, and her gaze lingered on the purple tent of King Arthur, with the banner of the red dragon on the pole above it. As she looked, she saw her husband issue from the tent and begin to walk up and down, alone, in a place apart. Very moody did he seem as he strode to and fro with bent head. Sometimes he looked towards Joyous Gard, and then his face had a sad expression upon it, which went to the queen's heart. She went to Sir Lancelot and said, "Sir Lancelot, I would that this dreadful war were done, and that thou wert again friends and in peace with my dear lord. Something tells me that he sorrows to be at enmity with thee. Thou wert his most famous knight, and brought most worship to the fellowship of the Round Table. Wilt thou not try to speak to my lord? Tell him how evil were the false reports of the conspiracy against him, and that we are innocent of any treason against him and this dear land."
"Lady," said Sir Lancelot, "on my knighthood I will try to accord with my lord. If our enemies have not quite poisoned his thoughts of us, he may listen and believe."
Thereupon Sir Lancelot caused his trumpeter to sound from the walls, and asked that King Arthur would hold a parley with him. This was done, and Sir Pentred, a knight of King Arthur's, took the message to the king. In a little while, King Arthur, with Sir Gawaine and a company of his counselors and knights, came beneath the walls, and the trumpeters blew a truce, and the bowmen ceased from letting fly their arrows, and the men-at-arms from throwing spears. Then Sir Lancelot came down to a narrow window in the gate tower, and cried out to the king, "Most noble king, I think that neither of us may get honor from this war. Cannot we make an end of it?"
"Aye," cried Sir Gawaine, his face red with anger, and shaking his mailed fist at Lancelot. "Come thou forth, thou traitor, and we will make an end of thee." "Come forth," said the king, "and I will meet thee on the field. Thou hast slain 30 of my good knights, taken my queen from me, and plunged this realm in ruin." "Nay, lord, it was not I that caused this war," said Sir Lancelot. "I had been but a base knight to have suffered the noble lady, my queen, to be burned at the stake, and it passes me, my lord king, how thou couldst ever think to suffer her to be burned." "She was charged with poisoning a knight who slandered her," said the king. "I must see justice done on high and low, and though it grieved me to condemn her, I could do naught else. Moreover, if Sir Pinel spoke true, Both you and she were conspiring to slay me, and to rule this kingdom in my stead." "A foul lie! A black calumny!" cried Sir Lancelot fiercely, "and I would answer for it with the strength which God might give me on any 6 of your knights that may say I am so black a traitor. I tell you, my lord king, and I swear it on my knighthood, and may death strike me now if I lie, that neither I nor the queen have ever had evil thoughts against your person, nor had designs upon your crown." At so solemn an oath, men stood still and waited, for few doubted in those days that if a man who took so great an oath was speaking falsely, fire from heaven would instantly descend and consume him. The moments passed, and nothing happened, and men breathed again. Sir Lancelot looked at the face of King Arthur, and saw by the light upon it that the king believed him, and Sir Lancelot rejoiced in his heart. He saw the king turn to Sir Gawaine with a questioning air, as if he would ask what more his nephew wanted. But next moment, with a harsh laugh, Sir Gawaine spoke. "Hark ye, Sir Lancelot! Thou mayest swear to heaven as to some things, and there are those that may be moved by thy round oaths. But this I charge upon thee, thou false, proud knight, that thou didst slay 2 unarmed men, men that loved thee and worshipped thee. Forsooth, thou boastful braggart and mouthing hero, thou wilt not dare to deny it." Sad was the face and voice of Sir Lancelot as he made reply. "I cannot hope to find excuse from you," he said, "for I cannot and never will forgive myself. I would as lief have slain my nephew Sir Bors as slay young Sir Gareth whom I loved, and Gaheris his brother. Sorrow is on me for that. I was mad in my rage, and did not see them, only I knew that many knights stood between me and the queen, and I slew all that seemed to bar my passage." "Thou liest, false recreant knight!" cried Sir Gawaine, whose grief by now had made him mad with the lust for revenge. "Thou slewest them in thy pride to despite me and the king, because we had permitted the queen to go to the stake. Thou coward and traitor! Therefore wit thee well, Sir Lancelot, I will not quit this quest until I feel my sword thrusting into thy evil heart." "Sorrow is on me," said Sir Lancelot, "to know that thou dost so hatefully pursue me. If thou didst not, I think my lord the king would give me his good grace again, and receive back his queen, and believe us innocent." "I believe it well, false recreant knight," cried Sir Gawaine, full of rage to know that the king verily wished to have peace. "But know ye that while I live, my good uncle will make war upon thee, and at last we will have thee in spite of thy castle walls and thy skill in battle, and then I will have thy head." "I trust ye for that," said Sir Lancelot, "for I see that thy hatred hath crazed thee, so if ye may get me, I shall expect no mercy." Then, seeing how useless it was to keep up the parley any longer, Sir Lancelot withdrew. Next day spies brought in word to Sir Lancelot that, at the council of his chief men, the king had said he would take back his queen and make peace with Sir Lancelot, but that Sir Gawaine had fiercely told him that if he did not keep up the war until Sir Lancelot was taken or slain, he and all the kin of Lot would break away from the realm and their allegiance. Indeed, it was rumored that Sir Gawaine would have made the king prisoner had he not yielded, and so powerful was Sir Gawaine and the lords that followed him, that none could have been strong enough to withstand them. Sir Gawaine, yearning by reason of his hatred to get Sir Lancelot out of his castle to fight with him, now sent knights to cry out shame upon him under his walls. Thus they marched up and down, calling out insulting names and charging him with dishonorable deeds, until at length the very men-at-arms that kept watch upon Sir Lancelot's walls reddened for shame, and hurled down spears and stones at the foul mouths. Sir Bors, Sir Ector de Maris, and Sir Lionel, they also heard the words, and going to the other knights of Sir Lancelot, took counsel with them, and decided that this could no longer be suffered. Together they went to Sir Lancelot and said to him, "Wit ye well, my lord,
that we feel great scorn of the evil words which Sir Gawaine spoke unto you, when that ye parleyed with him, and also of these shameful names which men call upon ye for all the citizens to hear. Wherefore we charge you and beseech you, if ye will to keep our service, hold us no longer behind these walls, but let us out in the name of heaven and your fair name, and have at these rascals." "Fair friends," replied Sir Lancelot, "I am full loath to fight against my dear lord, King Arthur." "But if ye will not," said Sir Lionel, his brother, "all men will say ye fear to stir from these walls, and hearing the shameful words they cry, will say that there must be truth in them if ye seek not to silence them." They spoke long with Sir Lancelot, and at length he was persuaded, and he sent a message to the king telling him that he would come out and do battle, but that, for the love he bore the king, he prayed he would not expose his person in the fight. But Sir Gawaine returned answer that this was the king's quarrel, and that the king would fight against a traitor knight with all his power. On the morrow, at 9 in the morning, King Arthur drew forth his host, and Sir Lancelot brought forth his array. When they stood facing each other, Sir Lancelot addressed his men, and charged all his knights to save King Arthur from death or wounds, and for the sake of their old friendship with Sir Gawaine, to avoid battle with him also. Then, with a great hurtling and crashing, the knights ran together, and much people were there slain. The knights of Sir Lancelot did great damage among the king's people, for they were fierce knights, and burned to revenge themselves for the evil names they had heard. Sir Gawaine raged like a lion through the field, seeking Sir Lancelot, and many knights did he slay or overthrow. Once, indeed, King Arthur, dashing through the fight, came upon Sir Lancelot. "Now, Sir Lancelot," he cried, "defend thee, for thou art the causer of this civil war." At these words he struck at Sir Lancelot with his sword, but Sir Lancelot took no means to defend himself, and put down his own sword and shield, as if he could not put up arms against his king. At this the king was abashed, and put down his sword, and looked sorrowfully upon Sir Lancelot. Then the surging tide of battle poured between them and separated them, until it happened that Sir Bors saw King Arthur at a little distance. With a spear the knight rushed at the king, and so fierce was his stroke and hearty his blow that the king was stricken to the ground. Whereupon Sir Bors leapt from his horse and drew his sword and ran towards the king. But someone called upon him, and looking up he saw Sir Lancelot riding swiftly towards him. Sir Bors held the king down upon the ground by the nose-piece of his helm, and in his other hand he held his naked sword. Looking up to Sir Lancelot, he cried in a fierce voice, "Cousin, shall I make an end of this war? 'Twere easy done." He meant that, if the king were slain, Sir Gawaine would lose half his forces, and could not hope to keep up the war against Sir Lancelot single-handed. "Nay, nay," said Sir Lancelot, "on peril of thy head touch not the king. Let him rise, man. I will not see that most noble king, who made me knight and once loved me, either slain or shamed." Sir Lancelot, leaping from his horse, went and raised the king, and held the stirrup of his horse while the king mounted again. "My lord Arthur," said Lancelot, looking up at the king, "I would in the name of heaven that ye cause this war to cease, for none of us shall get honour by it. And though I forbear to strike you, and I try to avoid my former brothers and friends of the Round Table, they do continually seek to slay me, and will not avoid me." King Arthur looked upon Lancelot, and thought how nobly courteous was he more than any other knight. The tears burst from the king's eyes, and he could not speak, and sorrowfully he rode away and would fight no more, but commanded the trumpets to cease battle. Whereupon Sir Lancelot also drew off his forces, and the dead were buried, and the wounded were tended. Next morning the battle was joined again. Very fiercely fought the king's party, for Sir Gawaine had commanded that no quarter should be given, and that whoever slew a knight of Sir Lancelot's should have his helm filled with gold. Sir Gawaine himself raged like a lion about the field, his spear in rest. He sought for Sir Lancelot, but that knight always avoided him, and great was Gawaine's rage and scorn. At length Sir Bors saw Sir Gawaine from afar, and spurred across the field towards him. "Ha, Sir Bors!" cried the other mockingly. "If ye will find that cowardly cousin of thine, and bring him here to face me, I will love thee." "'Twere well I should not take thy words seriously," mocked Sir Bors in his turn. "For if I were to bring him to thee, thou wert sure repent it. Never yet hath he failed to give thee thy fall, for all thy pride and fierceness." This was truth. Often in the jousting of earlier days, when Sir Lancelot had come in disguise and had been compelled to fight Sir Gawaine, the latter had had the worst. But Sir Lancelot, loving his old brother in arms as he did, had in later years avoided the assault with Sir Gawaine. Yet the greater prowess and skill of Sir Lancelot were doubted by none. Sir Gawaine raged greatly at the words of Sir Bors, for he knew they were true, though he had wished they were not. "Thy vaunting of thy recreant kinsman's might will not avail thee," he cried furiously. "Defend thyself." "I came to have to do with thee," replied Sir Bors fiercely. "Yesterday thou didst slay my cousin Lionel. Today, if God wills it, thou thyself shall have a fall." Then they set spurs to their horses and met together so furiously that the lance of either bore a great hole in the other's armour, and both were borne backwards off their horses, sorely wounded. Their friends came and took them up and tended them, but for many days neither of the knights could move from their beds. When the knights of Sir Lancelot saw that Sir Bors was grievously wounded, they were wroth with their leader. Going to him, they charged him with injuring his own cause. "You will not exert yourself to slay these braggart foes of yours," they said to him. "What does it profit us that you avoid slaying knights, because, though they are now your bitter foes, they were once brothers of the Round Table? Do they avoid ye, and seek not to slay you and us, your kindred and friends? Sir Lionel is dead, and he is your brother, and Sir Galk, Sir Griffith, Sir Saffrey, and Sir Conan, all good and mighty knights, are wounded sorely. Ye were ever courteous and kindly, Sir Lancelot," they ended, "but have a care lest now your courtesy ruin not your cause and us." Seeing by these words that he was like to chill the hearts of his friends if he continued to avoid slaying his enemies, Sir Lancelot sorrowfully promised that henceforth he would not stay his hand. After that he avoided none that came against him, though for very sorrow he could have wept when some knight, with whom in happier times he had drunk wine and jested at the board in Camelot, rushed at him with shrewd strokes to slay him. As the fight went on, the lust of battle grew in Sir Lancelot's heart, and manfully he fought, and with all his strength and skill he lay about him. By the time of evensong his party stood very well, and the king's side seemed dispirited, and as if they would avoid the fierce rushes with which Sir Lancelot's knights attacked them. Staying his horse, Sir Lancelot looked over the field and sorrowed to see how many dead there were, dead of whom many may have been slain by their own kindred. He saw how the horses of his knights were splashed with the blood that lay in pools here and there, and grief was heavy upon him. Sir Pelham, a very valiant knight, came up to him. "See, lord," he cried, "how our foes flinch from the fierce hurtling of our knights. They are dispirited by the wounding of Sir Gawaine. Sir Kay is also wounded, and Sir Torre is slain. Now if ye will take my advice, this day should cease this war once for all. Do ye gather all your forces, lord, and I think with one great dash together ye should scatter their wavering knights, and this field would be won." "Alas," said Sir Lancelot, "I would not have it so. It cuts me to my heart to war as I do against my Lord Arthur, and to trample him and his people in the mire of defeat. Nay, I should suffer remorse till my last day." "My lord," said Sir Pelham, "I think ye are unwise. Ye spare them thus to come again against ye. They will give ye no thanks, and if they could get you and yours at so great a disadvantage, wit you well they would not spare you." But Sir Lancelot would not be moved, and in pity he ordered the trumpeters to sound the retreat. King Arthur did likewise, and each party retired in the twilight from the field, where the wounded lay groaning till death or succour came, and the dead lay still and pale until the kindly earth was thrown over them. Some weeks passed in which the armies did not meet, for the host of King Arthur was not now so proud as they had been, seeing that they had lost many good knights, and Sir Lancelot would not of his own will sally out from his castle to fall upon the king. But ever Sir Gawaine tried to inflame the mind of King Arthur and his kinsmen against Sir Lancelot, and he advised them to join battle with their enemy,
Moreover, from the lands of his kingdom of Lothian, of which Sir Gawaine was now king in the place of his dead father, King Lot, a great body of young knights and men-at-arms came, and the king's party began to recover their courage. Many began daily to ride to the walls of Joyous Gard, and by insult and evil names endeavoured to tempt forth the men of Sir Lancelot. Soon the young knights clamoured to King Arthur and Sir Gawaine to permit them to attack the walls, and reluctantly the king consented to call his council for next day to devise some means of breaking down the castle. Headstrong was the counsel given by the young knights at that meeting, and greatly did King Arthur sorrow to feel that, for love of his nephew Sir Gawaine, he would be compelled to yield to their wild demands for further battle. Suddenly the door of the hall where sate the council was opened, and the porter of the gate appeared and approached the king. "My lord," he said, "the holy Bishop of London and King Geraint of Devon crave audience of you." Some of the fierce young knights scowled at the names and uttered cries of disgust. The king's face brightened, and before any could advise him against his will, he said, "Bid them enter instantly." "Thou meddling priest and the petty king that knoweth not his mind!" sneered Sir Gawaine, looking fiercely about the room. "I pray thee, uncle," he said to the king, "listen not to their womanish persuasions if thou lovest me." King Arthur did not answer, but looked towards the door impatiently. Through this there came first 3 priests and 3 armed men, and behind them stepped an old and reverend man, the hair beside his tonsure white as driven snow, and falling over his white robe edged with red that showed his rank as bishop. Then, towering above him, a noble knightly figure, came Geraint of Devon, grown nobler still since those noble days when he had proved himself to be a strong leader indeed, while men had thought him soft and foolish. All rose to their feet in reverence to the bishop, and fondly did King Arthur welcome Geraint, for this wise knight had from the first opposed Sir Gawaine in this war, and had refused to fight against Sir Lancelot and the queen, though he abated not his service to the king. Dark was the look which Gawaine darted at Geraint, but quiet yet fearless was Geraint's answering gaze. "What have ye to say?" said Gawaine angrily. "Say it quickly and begone. If ye are still of 2 minds, there seems no need to speak, and there is no need to bring a bishop to your aid." "Gawaine," said King Geraint, and his voice was quiet, yet with a ring of menace in it, "I think grief hath made you a little mad. Let the bishop speak, I pray ye. He hath a message for the king." "My lord," said the bishop, "I come from his holiness the Pope." At these words Sir Gawaine started forward, his hand upon his sword, as if he would willingly, in his madness, slay the holy priest. "And," went on the bishop, his grave voice and his quiet look not bating for all the wrathful fire in Sir Gawaine's eyes, "I bear with me the bull of his holiness. See, here it is, by which his highness doth charge King Arthur of Britain, as he is a Christian king, to take back Queen Guinevere unto his love and worship, and to make peace with Sir Lancelot." The murmurs of the wild young knights rose in a sudden storm, while Sir Gawaine glared with looks of hatred at King Geraint and the bishop. "And if ye do not this command," rang out the voice of the bishop, and there was sorrow in its tone, and silence sank on all. "If ye do not, then will his holiness excommunicate this land. None of ye here have seen so terrible a thing as a land laid under the interdict of the Holy Church, and rarely doth she find her children so stubbornly evil as to merit it. But the Father of the Church, seeing how this land is torn and rent by this bitter war between brothers, and fearful lest, while ye tear at each other's lives, the fierce and evil pagan will gain upon ye, and beat the lives from both of ye, and possess this fair island, and drive Christ and his religion from it utterly. Seeing all this, his holiness would pronounce the doom if ye are too stiff-necked to obey him. Then will ye see this land lie as if a curse were upon it. Your churches will be shut, and the relics of the holy saints will be laid in ashes. The priests will not give prayers, nor the church its holy offices, and the dead shall lie uncoffined, for no prayers may be said over them.
Say then, King Arthur of Britain, what shall be the answer to the command of his holiness, which here I lay before thee?" With these words the bishop held a parchment rolled out between his hands before the eyes of the king. Men craned forward and saw the black writing on the white skin, and the great seals or bulls hanging from it, whereupon those who could read saw the device of the Pope of Rome. "Say, is this thy doing?" cried Sir Gawaine fiercely, looking at King Geraint. "Didst thou send this meddling priest to Rome to get this?" "That did I," replied Geraint. "Then now I make this vow," thundered Sir Gawaine, "that though thou hast balked me of my vengeance now, I will mark thee, thou king of two minds, and be thou sure that ere long I will avenge me of this treachery, and that upon thy body and in thy blood." "I mark thy words, Sir Gawaine," said Geraint, whose eyes flashed fiercely, though his voice was calm. "And I say again, thou art mad. I will tell thee and the king our lord and master why I did advise the holy bishop to go to Rome and get the pope's command. First, as ye all know, I did think this war a wicked one beyond all measure, and ever have I raised my voice against it. And what I foresaw has come to pass. As the good priest saith, while ye tore at each other's throats here in the furthest marches of the north, the sly, fierce pagan, learning how all the land was rent and weakened by this evil war, has crept up in his longships. He has landed at many solitary places on the coast, and has spread far and wide throughout the land, burning and slaughtering. The long files of his captives, our kinsmen, go day by day, even as ye fight here, brother with brother, down to the black ships, and ye do naught to save them or avenge them. Already have I, in my office as Count of the Saxon shore, battered them back to their ships at Lemanis, Longporth, and Rutupiae. But here in the north, for all that the old lion Uriens of Reged, worn with war and full of age, hath taken the field against them, here, behind your backs as ye battle, kin with kin, a great and a stubborn pagan, whom men call Hiring the land waster, hath entered the land and still prevails. Crafty he is and strong, for he hath made treaties with some of our weaker kin, and their women he hath taken in marriage for his leaders, and thus in our very midst there is treachery, hand in hand with the brutal invaders. Yet still you, Gawaine, are so mad, so lost to all care for your nation's weal, that you would see your people ruined, and your land possessed by the savage boors of Saxons, while ye slake your vengeance for a private wrong. If still you so would do, I call you traitor, and by the grace of God I will make good my words upon your body, when we have thrust the pagan from the land, and peace is within our borders once again." While the thunder of his noble anger still rolled through the wide hall, King Arthur arose, and men marked the resolution in his eyes. "I will that there be no more war," he said, and he looked sternly at Gawaine. "Geraint hath spoken the truth, and the truth shall prevail. I repent me that I have so long forgotten the needs of my kingdom. Do thou now, good bishop, go to Sir Lancelot. Tell him that I will make peace with him, and that I will receive back my queen. And do thou, good Geraint, fare south again. I thank thee from my heart for what thou hast done. Would to heaven that all my knights were as clean-souled and as single-minded in devotion unto me as thou art. Do thou go and fulfill thy great office. Watch thou the coasts as hitherto thou hast watched them, and soon I will follow to aid thee should the foul and savage pagans strive again to break into my realm." But after all, Sir Gawaine had his way in part. The bishop took the king's assurance, sealed with his great seal, whereby he promised Sir Lancelot that he should come and go safe from murder or sudden onset, and desiring him to bring the queen to the king at his hall at Carlisle.
But in that parchment was no word of reconciliation with Sir Lancelot. Sir Gawaine fiercely told the king that the day on which he, the king, should clasp the hand of Lancelot in friendship, he, Sir Gawaine, with all his vassals and his men, would leave the kingdom. So deep and burning was the hatred which Gawaine bore Sir Lancelot, that he even threatened that, if his will was not granted, he would join the pagans and fight against the king. So shamed and saddened was the king at these words that, to put an end to his nephew's rage, he consented to do as he desired. Therefore, though the bishop strove to persuade the king to make his peace with Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawaine's will was done, and the bishop went sadly to Joyous Gard. He showed his writings to Sir Lancelot and the queen, and both were sorrowful, in that no word of reconciliation was said. "I will do my lord's desire," said the knight, "but I see that Sir Gawaine's hatred of me is in no way abated. Nevertheless, do thou ride, my lord bishop, to the king. Commend me unto his good grace, and say to him that in 5 days I will myself bring my lady, Queen Guinevere, unto him as he doth desire." On the day appointed, as the king sat in hall at Carlisle, surrounded by his knights and their ladies, with Sir Gawaine standing on the high seat beside him, there came the beat of many hoofs, and into the town rode Sir Lancelot, with the queen, knights, and squires accompanying them. They reined up at the wide door of the hall, and Sir Lancelot alighted, and having helped the queen to dismount, he took her hand and led her through the ranks of knights and ladies to where sat King Arthur. Sir Lancelot kneeled upon the edge of the dais, and the queen with him, and to see so noble a knight and so beautiful a lady, sad of countenance as they were, forced many a tear to the eyes of the knights and dames who looked on. Then rising and taking up the queen, Sir Lancelot spoke. "My most redoubted lord," he said, "you shall understand that by the Pope's commandment and yours, I have brought unto you my lady your queen, as right requireth. And if there be any knight here, of any degree, who shall say that she or I have ever thought to plot treason against your person or your crown, or the peace of this realm, then do I say here and now that I, Lancelot du Lake, will make it good upon his body that he lies. And, my gracious lord, if this is all that there is between you, my king, and myself, there need be naught of ill thought between us, but only peace and goodwill. But I wist well that one that hates me will not suffer ye to do what is in your good and kingly heart." Sternly did Sir Lancelot look at Sir Gawaine, while the tears gushed from King Arthur's eyes, and from the eyes of many that heard Sir Lancelot's sad words. Fierce and dark was the look which Sir Gawaine returned to Sir Lancelot. "The king may do as he will," he said harshly, and in a loud voice, "but wit thou well, Sir Lancelot, thou and I shall never be at peace till one of us be slain. For thou didst slay my twain brothers, though they bore no harness against thee nor any ill will, yet traitorously thou didst slay them." "Alas, my lord," said Sir Lancelot, and the tears bedewed his face, "I cannot ask you for your forgiveness for that deed, unwitting though it was done and in my madness. Would to heaven they had worn harness! Wit you well that ever will I bewail the death of my dear friend Sir Gareth. 'Twas I that made him knight, and ever did I delight to see him, to hear his manly laugh ring out, and to see the light in his brave eyes that never suffered a mean or evil action. I wot he loved me above all other knights, and there was none of my kinsmen that I loved so much as I loved him. Ever will the sorrow of the death of thy brethren lie upon my soul, and to make some small amends, I will, if my lord will suffer it, and it will please you, Sir Gawaine, I will walk in my shirt and barefoot from Lemanis even unto this town, and at every 10 miles I will found a holy house, and endow it with monks to pray for the souls of Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris. Surely, Sir Gawaine, that will do more good unto their souls than that my most noble lord and you should war on me." Every cheek was wet, and the tears of the king fell from his eyes, yet made he no effort to restrain or hide them. "Out upon such monkish deeds!" cried Sir Gawaine, and his scornful eyes surveyed the weeping knights and dames.
Know thee, once for all, that never shalt thou wipe away the treacherous murder of my brothers, but by thy blood. Ye are safe now for a season, for the Pope hath given you safety. But in this land, whatever comes of it, I care not. Thou shalt not abide above 15 days, or else I shall have thy head. So make ye no more ado, but deliver the queen from thee, and get thee quickly out of this court and out of this realm." "Well," said Sir Lancelot, and laughed grimly, "if I had known I should have so short an answer to my proffers of peace, I had thought twice ere I had come hither. But now, madam," he said, turning to the weeping queen beside him, "I must say farewell to ye, for now do I depart from this noble fellowship and this dear realm for ever. Pray for me, and send me word if any lying tongues speak evil of you, and if any knight's hand may deliver you by battle, believe me, mine shall so deliver you." With these words Sir Lancelot bent and kissed the queen's hand, and so turned away and departed. There was neither king, baron, knight, nor squire of all that great company who did not weep, nor think that Sir Gawaine had been of most evil mind to refuse the noble proffers of Sir Lancelot. Heavy was King Arthur ever thereafter, and never might man see his face brighten or hear his laugh, and the better of his knights sorrowed with him, and knew what was in his heart. "In this realm will be no more quiet," said Sir Owen of the Fountain to his fellows as they stood upon the walls of Carlisle and saw the band of Sir Lancelot riding southwards, the sunlight flashing from their helms and armour. "The pagans have gathered strength daily while we have fought with each other, and that which would have given us the strength and the union which would hurl them from our coasts is shattered and broken. By the noble fellowship of the Round Table was King Arthur and his realm borne up, and by their nobleness the king and all his realm was in quietness and in peace. And a great part," he ended, "was because of the noble nature of Sir Lancelot, whom Sir Gawaine's mad rage hath driven from the kingdom. Nor is all the evil ended yet." End of chapter 12. Recording by Tamara Schwartz, Newburgh, Oregon.
Chapter 13 of King Arthur's Knights. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. King Arthur's Knights, the tales retold for boys and girls by Henry Gilbert. Chapter 13. Of the rebellion of Mordred and the death of King Arthur. When Sir Lancelot and all his men had left the realm of Britain and had betaken themselves to Brittany, where Sir Lancelot had a kingdom of his own, the Saxons began to increase in Britain, both in strength and numbers. Almost daily a long black ship, crammed with pagans, was sighted from some part of the coast, and the British, praying that the fierce pirates would not visit their homes, would watch the terrible warship till it passed, or else, caught unawares, would have to flee inland in a breathless panic when the dragon-headed prow loomed through the sea mist and the barbarous warriors swarmed over the sides and ran knee-deep in the water, their eyes gleaming with the joy of killing and their hands eager for the looting. Then King Arthur made ready a great host, and for 2 years he fought in the northern parts against the bands of pirates. Swift were the blows he struck, for the great wide Roman roads were still open, not grass-grown and deserted, and with his mounted knights and men he could ride quickly from place to place, striking fiercely and scattering the foul pagans. 10 was the number of these battles which he fought in the north, 6 against the Saxon pirates and 4 against the wild cats of Caledonia, whom men call Picts and Scots, and who had ventured south in great numbers as soon as they heard how the king warred with his lords, and the rich land was open to plunder. 2 others he fought in the south, one against an insolent band of pirates who dared even to attack his palace city of Caerleon upon Usk, but so heavy and deadly a blow did he strike at them then, that from that battle barely a dozen pagans were left to flee like fire to their ships. Not without loss of many of his brave warriors did Arthur win these battles, for the pagans were good men of their hands, and not easily were they beaten. Saddest of all was the loss of the noble Geraint, who, thrusting back the pirates once again from the harbour of Longporth, got his death there with many of his valiant men. When the fame of King Arthur's prowess and the might of his knights had gone abroad among the pagans, they were afraid and would not venture in great numbers to invade the land again, and there was peace and rest in Britain for a space. Then Sir Gawaine, remembering his hatred of Sir Lancelot, persuaded the king to make him ready another host, with which to invade the land of Brittany, where Sir Lancelot ruled his kingdom. For a long time the king would not listen to his advice, and the queen, with all her power, strove against Sir Gawaine. But that knight and his large following of knights and men-at-arms had been of great service in the recent wars against the pagans, and the king could not wholly refuse to listen to Sir Gawaine's demands. Also Sir Mordred added his words to those of his brother, and said that men who came from Brittany said that Sir Lancelot was getting him ready a large army, and training many men, although he was at peace with his neighbours in Gaul. But the rumour went, as Sir Mordred reported, that Sir Lancelot was only waiting his time, and when King Arthur should be more than usually pressed by his pagan foes, Sir Lancelot and his great host would sail swiftly across the sea and seize the kingdom of Britain, when Arthur, exhausted by war, would be unable to withstand the fresh warriors of Sir Lancelot, and would lose both his queen and his crown. For a time the king would not suffer these evil rumours to be mentioned in his presence, but many of his counsellors thought there was much truth in them. At length, so persistent was Sir Mordred and those whom he craftily persuaded to believe him, that for sheer weariness the king consented to take an army across to Brittany, and to demand that Sir Lancelot should own that the king was his overlord, and that he should do homage to King Arthur for his kingdom. The host was prepared, therefore, and at a meeting of his council King Arthur made his nephew, Sir Mordred, regent of Britain, to rule in the king's place while he should be abroad, and Queen Guinevere he placed under the governance of Sir Mordred, as well as the officers of the court. When they had passed the sea and landed in the coast of Sir Lancelot's country, Sir Gawaine ordered his knights to go through the nearer parts, burning the houses of the people and wasting their lands. This he did in order to enrage Sir Lancelot against the king, so that he would not listen quietly to any demand which the king might make of him. Word was brought to Sir Lancelot of the landing of King Arthur and the plundering and wasting of the land, but for some days he would do naught, for he was loath to take up arms against the king he loved, and who had made him a knight. At length Sir Bors came to him, and with that knight were others, as Sir Lunel of the Brake, Sir Magus of Pol, and Sir Alan of the Stones, with his 6 mighty brothers. "My lord Sir Lancelot," said Sir Bors, "it is a great shame that we suffer them to ride over our lands, burning the homes of our folk and destroying the crops in the fields." Sir Alan also, who with his brothers were 7 as noble knights as a man might seek in 7 lands ere he might find a brotherhood as valiant and withal as courteous, spoke to the like purport, saying, "Sir Lancelot, for the love of our land, let us ride out and meet these invaders in the field, for we have never been wont to cower in castles nor in towns." Then spoke Sir Lancelot, who was lord of them all. "My fair lords," he said, "ye wit well that I am loath to raise my hand against my own dear lord, and to shed the blood of Christian men. Yet I understand how it chafes you to stand by and see your fair land ruined by those that hate me. Therefore I will send a messenger to my lord Arthur, desiring him to make treaty with me. Then when we have his reply, we will consider the matter further." A damsel was therefore sent to the camp of King Arthur, and she bore a message from Sir Lancelot. She was brought to Sir Lucan, who was the king's butler, and she told him whence she had come and why. Alas, said Sir Lucan, I fear ye have made a long journey in vain, fair damsel. My lord King Arthur would quickly accord with Sir Lancelot,
whom he loves, but Sir Gawaine will not suffer him.
Just then Sir Gawaine happened to pass by, and he saw the maiden, and knew that she was not one of their party. He turned towards her, and his fierce eyes looked at her grimly sour. "Whence come ye?" he said harshly. "I come hither to speak with King Arthur," said the maiden, "for I bear a message from my lord Sir Lancelot." With an angry gesture Sir Gawaine seized her bridle and led her palfrey swiftly to the edge of the camp. "Depart," he cried harshly, "and tell your master that it is idle for him to send to mine uncle. Tell him from me, Sir Gawaine, that by the vow of my knighthood I will never leave this land till I or he be slain. Now go." When this message was told to Sir Lancelot, the tears stood in his eyes, and he went apart. And for that day the knights his comrades held their council. But they resolved that the next day they would prevail upon Sir Lancelot to issue forth and give battle. But in the morning, when they looked from the walls of the castle, they saw that Sir Gawaine had crept up in the dawn, and now was the place besieged. Thereupon was fierce fighting, for Sir Gawaine had caused ladders to be reared, and his knights strove to climb over the wall, but were mightily beaten back by Sir Lancelot's party. Then the attackers drew off for a space, and Sir Gawaine, well armed, came before the chief gate upon a stout steed. He shook his lance at the men over the gate and cried, "Where art thou, false traitor, Sir Lancelot? Why dost thou hide thyself within holes and walls like a coward? Look out now, thou timid soul, for when I may get at thee I will revenge upon thy evil body the death of my brothers twain." These shameful words were heard by Sir Lancelot and all his knights and kin that stood about him, and they said, "Sir Lancelot, now ye must be done with thy courtesy, and go forth and beat back those evil words upon his foul mouth." "It is even so," said Sir Lancelot, "but sorry I am, and heavy of spirit thus to fight with him, who hath been my dear brother in arms so long, and whose brothers I did unwittingly slay, and much evil shall come of this." Then he commanded his strongest horse to be saddled, and bade his armour to be dressed upon him, and when he was fully armed he stood at the top of the gate and cried upon the king. "My lord Arthur," he said, "you that made me knight, wit you well that I am right heavy that ever ye do pursue me thus. But now that Sir Gawaine hath used villainous words about me, I must needs defend myself." Sir Gawaine, seated upon his horse below, laughed grimly and cried upon the other. "O Lancelot, Lancelot," he said, "what a man of his words thou art! If thou darest to battle with me, cease thy babbling, man, and come off, and let us ease our hearts with strong blows." Then Sir Lancelot issued forth with many of his knights, and a covenant was made between the hosts that there should be no fighting until Sir Gawaine and Sir Lancelot had fought together, and one was either dead or yielden. Thereupon the two knights departed some way, and then came together with all the might of their horses, and each smote the other in the midst of the shield. So strong were the knights, and stout and big the spears, that their horses could not stand the shock, and so fell to the ground. Then the knights quickly avoided their horses and dressed their shields, and fought fiercely together with their swords. So valiantly did each give and receive blows, and so heavy and grim was their fighting, that all the knights and lords that stood thereabout marvelled thereat, and were fain to say in as many good words that never had they seen such sword play. In a little while, so shrewd and skilful were they, both were wounded, and the blood oozed from the joints of their armour, and it was great marvel to see that they could still stand, dashing their shields upon each other, and each beating upon the other with great slashes of their swords. And which was the stronger of the twain none might say. Now Sir Gawaine had a magic power, which had been endowed upon him at his birth by a great witch, who was a friend of his mother, the sorceress Queen Morgan le Fay, wife of King Lot. No one knew of this secret power except King Arthur, and often had it availed Sir Gawaine. so that in dire perils of onfall, sudden ambush, or long battle, it had given him the victory, when all about him had been slain or wounded or taken captive. The magic was that from the hour of 9 until high noon, the strength of his body increased until it was 3 times his natural strength, which itself was full great, though in that, for deep wind and breath and might of arms, Sir Lancelot was the stronger. Now while they fought together, Sir Lancelot felt that Sir Gawaine seemed not to weaken as time went on, and he marvelled greatly. Then he felt that indeed Sir Gawaine's strength was greater than it had been at the beginning, and a fear came into his heart that Sir Gawaine was possessed of a demon. But Sir Lancelot was stout of heart as well as old in warcraft, and he knew that if he could tire Sir Gawaine, he might, by one blow, get the better of him when he saw a good chance. Therefore Sir Lancelot began to husband his strength, and instead of spending it in feinting and attacking, he bore his shield ever before him, covering himself from the fierce blows of his enemy. Thus he kept up his own strength, but hard put to it was when, towards midday, Sir Gawaine seemed to have the might of a very giant, and the shield arm of Sir Lancelot was numbed by reason of the crushing blows which Sir Gawaine's sword rained upon it. Great travail indeed had Sir Lancelot to stand up and not to yield, and while men marvelled at how he could endure, none knew all he suffered. Then, as the bell of the convent in the town boomed forth the hour of noon, Sir Gawaine heaved up his sword for a final blow, but his sword descended just as the last stroke of 12 had died away, and Sir Lancelot marvelled to feel that what should have been so grievous a blow that belike he could not have stood before it, fell upon his shield with no more than the strength of the blow given by an ordinary man. When Sir Lancelot felt the might of Sir Gawaine so suddenly give way, he drew himself up to his full height and said, "Sir Gawaine, I know not by what evil power ye have fought, but now I feel that ye have done. Now, my lord Sir Gawaine, I must do my part, for none may know the great and grievous strokes I have endured this day with great pain." With that Sir Lancelot redoubled his blows, and the sword of Sir Gawaine gave before the might of Sir Lancelot, and his shield was rent. Then Sir Lancelot gave so great a buffet on the helm of the other that Sir Gawaine staggered, and with yet another blow Sir Lancelot hurled him headlong to the ground. Men held their breath, for now, after so fierce and stubborn a struggle, they felt sure that Sir Lancelot, hot and enraged against his enemy, would rip off the other's helm and strike his head off instantly. But instead, Sir Lancelot stood for a moment looking at his prostrate enemy. Then men gasped to see him thrust his sword into its scabbard with a clang, turn upon his heel and begin to walk away. They saw the prone knight raise his head and look as if in surprise at the retreating figure of Sir Lancelot. "Why dost thou depart?" cried Sir Gawaine, rage in his mocking voice. "Turn again, false knight, and slay me. If ye leave me thus, thou shalt gain nothing from it, for when I am whole, I will slay thee when I may." Men marvelled to hear a fallen foe use such shameful and hateful words, but they marvelled much more when Sir Lancelot, turning, cried, "I shall endure you, sir, if God give me grace. But wit you well, Sir Gawaine, I will never smite you to death." Many that before had hated Sir Lancelot were moved by these noble words and by the sight of his mercy, and they deemed that there was hardly another man in all Christendom that would have shown such nobility, save Sir Galahad and Sir Perceval, and they were dead. So Sir Lancelot went into the city, and Sir Gawaine was borne into King Arthur's tent, and his wounds were cleaned and salved. Thus he lay for 3 weeks, hard of mood and bitter in his hatred, and longing eagerly to get well, so that he might try again to slay Sir Lancelot. Meanwhile he prayed the king to attack Sir Lancelot's walls, to try to draw him forth, or to take the city by treachery. But the king would do naught. He was sick for sorrow because of the war that was between him and Sir Lancelot, and by reason of the wounds of his nephew, Sir Gawaine. "Alas," was ever his reply, "neither you nor I, my nephew, will win worship at these walls, for we make war for no reason, with as noble a knight as ever drew breath, and one more merciful and courteous than any that ever graced the court of any Christian king." "Nevertheless," replied Sir Gawaine, raging at the king's love for Sir Lancelot, "neither his mercy nor courtesy would avail against my good sword, once I could sink it in his treacherous heart." As soon as Sir Gawaine might walk and ride, he armed him at all points and mounted a great courser, and with a long wide spear in his hand he went spurring to the great gate of the town. "Where art thou, Lancelot?" he cried in a fierce voice. "Come thou forth, traitor knight and recreant. I am here to revenge me on thy evil body for thy treacherous slaughter of my twain brothers." All this language Sir Lancelot heard, and hearing from the tower, he thus spake: "Sir Gawaine, it sorrows me that ye will not cease your foul speaking. I know your might and all that ye may do, and well ye what ye may do me great hurt or death." "Come down then," cried Sir Gawaine, "for what my heart craves is to slay thee. Thou didst get the better of me the other day, and I come this day to get my revenge. And wit thee well, I will lay thee as low as thou didst lay me." "I will not keep ye waiting long," said Sir Lancelot, "for as ye charge me of treachery, ye shall have your hands full of me ere long, however the battle between us may end." Then happened it even as before. The knights encountered first with spears, but Sir Gawaine's broke into 100 pieces upon the shield of Sir Lancelot. Then, dismounting, the knights fought on foot with swords. Sir Gawaine put forth all his strength, hoping, with the magic power which he possessed, to dash Sir Lancelot to his knees. But Sir Lancelot was more wary than before, and under cover of his shield he husbanded his strength until the hour of noon, when, as before, he felt that Sir Gawaine's might had strangely ebbed away. When that had come to pass, Sir Lancelot said: "Now once more I have proved that ye fight not with a man's fair strength, Sir Gawaine, but with some evil power, and full grievously was I put to it to withstand many of thy sad blows. Now ye have done your great deeds, and I will do mine." Then, with one stroke, of so marvellous a force that men marvelled, Sir Lancelot beat down Sir Gawaine's guard and struck him a full heavy blow on the side of the helm, beating it in so that the old wound burst again. Sir Gawaine fell to the ground, and for some moments lay still as if he were dead or in a swoon. But he was only dazed, and soon recovering, he raved and foamed as he lay there, cursing Sir Lancelot for a traitorous coward and a base knight, and even, in his madness, thrusting towards him with his sword. "Wit thou well, base knight," he cried, "that I am not slain yet. Come thou near and lie here with me, and we will fight this battle until we die." "I will do no more than I have done, my lord," said Sir Lancelot, "and when thou art able to stand I will meet thee again. But to smite a wounded man that may not stand I will not." Then Sir Lancelot withdrew to the town, while Sir Gawaine still raved and abused him, and men marvelled both at the exceeding madness of the hatred of Sir Gawaine and the great restraint and nobleness of Lancelot. Many said that had Sir Gawaine said half as many shameful things to one of them, they would have instantly raised his evil head from his shoulders. For a month Sir Gawaine lay sick, but was always eager to be up and able again, and at length the leech said that in 3 days he should ride, whereat Sir Gawaine was joyful. "Again," said he to King Arthur, who sat beside him, "again shall I have to do with that base fellow, and ill attend me if I do not end the matter this time." "He had ended it long ago, or had been ended," said the king, "except for the nobleness of Sir Lancelot that forbore to slay you." "Ay, we all know your love of the pestilent fool, uncle," said Sir Gawaine, "but we will stay here until we have made an end of him in his kingdom, if it take us all our lives." Even as he spoke there came the clear call of a trumpet outside in the camp, and Sir Bedevere came to the door of the king's tent, his grim old face pale, his grizzled hair unkempt, and every sign of haste and travel upon his dress. The king started up. "Sir Bedivere, ye bring evil tidings from Britain," he cried. "Can it be that more ruin and wrong is to come than that I suffer now? What is your news?" "O my king, it is that Mordred, your nephew, hath rebelled," said Sir Bedivere, "and has gathered much people about him, and hath sent many letters to all the lords and knights your vassals, promising them wealth and lands if they make him king. And Guinevere, your queen, he hath imprisoned, saying that he will wed her when ye are slain." "Mordred, Mordred!" cried the king. "Him that I thought was a quiet, strong man, turned so base a traitor." "Ay, he was ever the traitor, though brother of mine," cried Sir Gawaine in a voice of rage. "A man that speaks in whispers, haunts dark corners, and ever sneers with his lips." "Hardly with my life I have escaped to tell you this," went on Sir Bedivere, "for he placed men to watch me after I had scorned his evil offers to myself. But now, my lord, quickly ye must betake yourself and all your army from this fruitless and wrongful war against Sir Lancelot, and hasten to beat down the poisonous viper whom ye have nourished in your bosom." Ere the day was done, the army of King Arthur had raised the siege of Sir Lancelot's town, and were quickly marching to the sea, there to take their boats across to Britain to punish the usurper and traitor, Sir Mordred. A fair wind carried them across the sea, but long ere they reached the shallows of the beach at Dover, they saw the sunlight flashing from thousands of headpieces of knights and men-at-arms, set to oppose the landing of their rightful lord. The king was fiercely angry, and he commanded the masters of the ships to launch their small boats, and into these the knights swarmed and were rowed towards the shore. But the rebels of Mordred also launched boats and great pinnaces filled with knights, and when the boats of the opposite parties met, then there was fierce fighting and much slaughter of many good knights and barons and other brave men. Then King Arthur and his chief knights drew forth their horses from the holds of the ships, and leapt with them into the sea, and fiercely did they throw themselves upon Sir Mordred and his knights. And there was grievous fighting on horseback in the shallow water, which soon was dyed with the blood of the slain. So stubborn were the king and his fighting men that the army of Mordred was forced to retreat towards the land, and then, when the king and Gawaine had trimmed their own ranks, order was given for one concerted rush against the enemy. The other side showed little fight now, and made no stand, but fled inland. When the battle was over, King Arthur let bury his people that were dead, so far as they could be discovered in the waves, and the wounded he caused to be carried into the town of Dover to be cared for. A squire came to the king as he stood giving orders to these things. "My lord king," said the squire, "Sir Gawaine lies sore wounded in a boat, and we know not whether he be alive or dead." "Alas!" cried the king, and the knights about him were full of pity at the sudden grief that came into his voice and his looks. "Is this true? Then is all my joy of life at an end?" The squire led him to the boat in which Sir Gawaine lay, who stirred as the king approached, and feebly smiled. "My uncle," said Sir Gawaine, "wit you well that now is my death day come, for I know I shall not last this bout, for I am smitten upon the wound which Sir Lancelot gave me, and I feel that now I shall die." "Alas, my sister's son!" cried the king, taking Sir Gawaine in his arms and kissing him, while the tears flowed down his cheeks. "This is the woefullest day of all my life. For if ye depart, Gawaine, how solitary am I! Gawaine, Gawaine, in Sir Lancelot and in thee had I most my love and my joy, and now I shall lose ye both, and all my earthly joy is gone from me." "Alas," said Sir Gawaine, "sorrows on me now that I have caused you such grief, mine uncle. I see now that I have been mad with rage against that noble knight Sir Lancelot, who slew my dear brothers unwittingly, and now I repent me sorely. I would that I could live to repair the evil that I have done to you and to Sir Lancelot, but my time is come. I shall not live till evening." They wept together, and the knights that stood about them also wept for pure grief, to think how much sorrow and ruin was caused by the mad rage of Sir Gawaine, which had pushed the good king on to make war against his will. "I am the causer of this rebellion by my traitor brother," said Sir Gawaine, "and my name shall be cursed for it. Had I not wilfully driven thee, thou wouldst have accorded with Sir Lancelot, and he and his brave kinsmen would have held your cankered enemies in subjection, or else cut them utterly away. Lift me up, my lord, and let me have a scribe, for I will send a letter to Sir Lancelot ere I die." Then Sir Gawaine was set up by the king, and a priest was brought, who wrote at the dying man's dictation, and the purport of the letter was in this wise: "Unto Sir Lancelot, flower of all noble knights that ever I heard of or saw, and once my dear friend, now do I, Sir Gawaine, King Lot's son of Orkney and the Lothians, and sister's son to King Arthur, send thee greeting, and let thee know by these writings that I am this day done to death, having been wounded at the landing against rebellious traitors, and struck upon the wound which thou didst give me twice before thy city, whereby I have got my death. But I will have thee to wit that I sought my death of thee, and got that wound deservedly of thee, who could have slain me twice, but for thy high nobility and great courtesy. I, Gawaine, beseech of thee forgiveness for my madness, and crave that thou wilt remember the dear friendly days we have had together in times long past, and for all the love that was between us. Come thou over the sea, and with thy knights do thou press to the help of Arthur, our noble lord, who is beset by a traitorous villain, my brother Mordred, who hath dared to rebel against his rightful lord, and hath crowned himself king. Do thou hasten, good Sir Lancelot, when thou shalt receive this letter, and follow the king. But ere thou goest from this seashore, do thou come to my tomb, and pray some prayer more or less for my sinful soul, that in its madness did evilly entreat thee." Then was Sir Gawaine shriven, and in a little while he swooned, while all stood uncovered round about him. When the rays of the afternoon sun cast long shadows of the knights and fighting men who were hurrying up and down the shore, making ready to depart, Sir Gawaine awoke from his swoon and looked up. For a moment he did not recognise King Arthur. Then he smiled at him very sweetly and said in a low voice, "Kiss me and forgive me." The king knelt down and kissed the pallid face of Sir Gawaine, and for very sorrow he felt that the heart in his breast was nigh to bursting. So in a little while, with the beat of the surf and the cry of the seagulls upon his ears, the light of the sun in his eyes, and the free air of heaven all about him, Sir Gawaine died, and his death was as he had ever craved it to be, under the open sky, after battle, where he had given good strokes and received them. Now the letter which Sir Gawaine had written was given unto a young squire of Sir Gawaine's by the name Tudor, and he was commanded to depart forthwith back to Brittany and deliver it into the hands of Sir Lancelot. But among the knights that had stood about the dying Sir Gawaine was a traitor, who was in the service of Sir Mordred the rebel, and he knew that if Sir Lancelot should receive that letter and come to Britain with all his brave kin and their host, Sir Mordred would have much ado to conquer King Arthur. Therefore the traitor knight, whose name was Sir Fergus, did accost Tudor the squire, and with fair seeming told him that he also was bidden to go back to Brittany, to bring back certain jewels which the king in his hasty departure had left in his lodging at the town of Dol. Tudor, unsuspecting of all evil, went aboard a boat with Sir Fergus, and together they bargained with the master to take them across when the tide should rise again at dark. Together they crossed the sea that night and took the road towards Sir Lancelot's town, and in a dark wood Sir Fergus set upon the squire, who fought bravely but was slain at last, and the letter of Sir Gawaine was taken by the traitor. Then, returning to the seashore, the wretch went aboard another boat, and chaffered with the merchant to take him across the sea to the town of Longporth, whence he thought to get quickly to Mordred, to receive from him the reward of his treachery and murder. But at night, as they sailed over the dark sea, a 50-oared longship, filled with Saxon pirates, crept upon them. The pagans poured over the sides, slew men almost in their sleep, and flung their bodies overboard. And though Fergus fought well, his head was almost struck from his body by a great shearing axe blow. When the pirates had taken all the goods they desired from the merchant vessel, they stove a hole in its side, and it sank to the bottom of the sea, so that no man ever again saw the letter which was meant for Sir Lancelot. For some weeks Sir Lancelot lay quiet, knowing naught of the death of Sir Gawaine, or of the letter desiring him to go to the help of King Arthur. Many rumours came to him through the shipfolk of the wrecked rebellion of Sir Mordred, and though Sir Lancelot longed to go across to Britain and fight for King Arthur, his kinsman would not consent, but said it would be unseemly unless the king craved his aid, and sued for pardon for making war against Sir Lancelot in his own country. Thus precious weeks went by, and much ill fortune happened in Britain, that had ended otherwise if Sir Lancelot had been by the king. 3 days after the battle upon the shore, the king's host came up with the host of Sir Mordred on Barham Down. Many folks had joined the rebels' side because they hated the king for making war upon Sir Lancelot, and the king was sorely hurt in his mind to see a banner borne by one part of the usurper's army, on which was the device of Sir Lancelot's. This the crafty Sir Mordred had commanded to be done, knowing that it would damp the spirits of King Arthur and his men. "Verily," said King Arthur, "my evil deeds have sprung up as armed men against me. I have fought unjustly with Sir Lancelot, and here are some that loved him, arrayed against me for that wicked war." "If ye would send for Sir Lancelot," said Sir Owen of the Fountain, who stood by him, "ye would learn, I verily believe, that Sir Lancelot loves and worships you as of old, and hath no mind to fight on the side of this sly fox Mordred. Send for Sir Lancelot, lord." "Nay, I will not, I may not," said the king. "If he cometh by the words which Sir Gawaine wrote to him, I shall know that he loves me and forgives me. But if he cometh not, I shall know he hates me, and I shall merit his ill favour. He owes naught to me, since I used him so evilly, and therefore I may not ask his aid." All day the battle raged upon the great green down, and many were the fierce fights which took place upon the top thereof, where, behind great earthworks freshly timbered, the main host of Sir Mordred stood, the banner of the great red dragon in their midst. But at the last, so fast and fierce did the blows of King Arthur's men fall, and so stubbornly did they press on, that Sir Mordred's host gave way. Pouring forth by the upper gate, they ran pell-mell northwards, and the knights and fighting men of Arthur kept up with them for many miles. And there was a running fight, and much wounding and slaying all through the fresh green countryside, where hedges were laden with May blossoms, and the skylarks were trilling. And that day many a wounded man crawled groaning into the thickets to die. Many a chalky cart rut ran red with blood, and many a white face with wide open sightless eyes stared up at the blue sky, where the fleecy clouds sailed in the gentle wind. For 3 weeks after this battle both sides rested, and like great wrestlers gathered all their strength for one great struggle. Knights and riders were sent by both sides to all parts with letters to lords and knights, charging them to take their sides in the war. Many people from about London came to the banner of Mordred, and the parts now called Kent, Sussex and Surrey, Essex and Suffolk, held wholly with him, but those in the west, as Wales, Devon, Cornwall, and the middle parts, thronged to the banner of the king. Few came from the north, for there the pagan pirates stalked with fire and sword through and through the land, and the British lords and chiefs that were alive had little power to stay them now. King Uriens was dead, slain by the dagger of a traitor, and so were 2 other great chieftains, so that men south of Trent sorrowfully shook their heads, and said that now the north was no longer the land of the British folk, but was given over to the savage heathen hordes. Then, to meet the many that flocked together in his favour, King Arthur drew him with his host westward beyond Sarum. There on the wide downs beside the great standing stones of the old princes, which men now call Stonehenge, a great multitude of chiefs and knights and yeomen came to his banner. But Sir Mordred avoided a battle, and instead kept aloof with his army, and began to burn and harry the country which was on the side of Arthur. He took Caliva and Cunito, and put the people to the sword, and took much gear from those wealthy cities. Then he stole through the great forest by night, and came to Paludin, which was a rich town builded upon the top of a great hill. He thought to take this unawares, but it was well watched and well armed, and he strove to break into it, and was kept about it for some days. That delay was used well by King Arthur, for he made great haste to pass through the wild country, filled with wide marshes and thick woods as it was, which separated him from his enemy. Then Mordred, hearing through the spies of the king's approach, got his host away, and thought to pass into the lands of Devon, which were those of King Duer, son of the dead Geraint, and held firmly for Arthur. But in the wild wasteland beside the endless waters, King Arthur caught up with him, and barred his further way, and the king remembered that this was the same land, full of gaunt standing stones, and haunted by trolls and witches, where Merlin had once led him, and where he had gained the sword Excalibur. It was late in the day when the two armies faced each other, and both prepared to pass the night upon the field. Bitter was the wind that evening, and the skies were dun and leaden of hue, as if spring had been overcome by winter. And to shelter the king, a tent had been put up in a little dark wood of stunted firs, called the Wood of Drood. Just in the deep dark before the dawn, when the blood in men's veins was coldest, and the life in their hearts was weakest, a dreadful cry wailed out through the dark wood, and there came the sound as of leathery wings flapping heavily to and fro above where the king lay sleeping. Men started up about their ashen fires, their faces blanching at the terror that cried in the dark, and they heard a wailing twice repeated, while none dared to try see the thing that wailed. Then, while their blood chilled and their breath stayed, they heard the heavy flapping pass over their heads and die away towards the camp of Mordred, and there in the distance did the three cries sound again. Men's hearts sickened as they turned and crept the nearer to each other, but few dared to utter the words upon their lips. Two knights slept in the tent with King, Sir Kay and Sir Owen, and they lay in the dark, trembling at the cries of terrible import. When they passed, the knights would not move, fearing to be the first to speak. "My lords," came the quiet voice of King Arthur out of the dark. That was the voice of the Hag of Warning. "Men say it hath foretold the deaths of many for my house, but I know not. Yet I will take the issue as God shall give it me, trusting in his mercy and the blood of his Son Jesus, and him crucified." "Amen," said the two knights, and said no more. When in a little while the sun rose, flashing his warm rays into the fearful eyes that greeted him, men's terror quickly vanished, and when fires were lit and oaten cakes were browning on the irons, or collops sputtered on their skewers, tongues were loosened and faces began to smile. But few spoke of the cries which they had heard, for all loved their king, and hoped that somehow they had dreamed an evil dream, or had but heard the cries of some foul night bird. Breakfast being ended, the captains and knights began to trim their men in army array, and talk was eager of the coming battle. Then were seen, coming from Sir Mordred's camp, two bishops, and these were taken at their desire to Arthur, where he stood surrounded by his knights and chieftains. "Lord," said one of the bishops, he that was head of the great choir or monastery of Amesbury, "cannot we make accord between you and your nephew? Sad it is to see so many great and valiant warriors ranged against each other. Many are sisters, sons, and all are of one speech, one kindred. If this unnatural war doth continue, how much sorrow there will be! How many noble hearts be stilled in death or broken in grief for him that shall never return! How many puissant bodies, now quick and passionate and handsome, will be meat for snarling wolves and carrion for foul birds!" "What says my rebellious nephew?" asked the king sternly. "My lord," said the other bishop, a man of soft and silky speech, and he was chief of the choir of Clovisho, "he asks but little, and if ye are willing to make treaty, he is also willing. Grant him but the earldom of Kent and the Andred with a seat at London during your days, and do thou appoint him king after your days, For now that Sir Gawaine, Sir Gaheris, and Sir Gareth are slain, he is the only sister's son you have. If you grant these things, he will be your liege, faithful in all things, and a strong arm against your enemies." Then some of King Arthur's knights would have him agree to these terms, but others would not, and said the king should make no treaty with a traitor, but that Mordred should come and throw himself upon the mercy of his king and uncle. At the last, after much counsel had been taken, King Arthur agreed to meet Mordred with 14 of his chief men in the space betwixt their hosts, and the king should also take 14 knights with him. So the bishops went back with this message, and King Arthur called the chieftains of his host about him. "I go to see this traitor, my nephew," he said to them, "whether he means falsely or truly with this talk of a treaty. But look ye, I in no wise trust him. Hold ye your men warily, and if ye see any sword drawn amongst us where we stand, do thou sound the horns of attack, and come on fiercely, and slay that rebel and all that hold with him." In like wise did Mordred warn his men, "For," said he, knowing how greatly he had sinned against his generous and noble uncle, "I know well that King Arthur and his knights would be avenged of me if they could." The party from each army went forward over the stony hillside until they met midway between the armies, and men watched them keenly. King Arthur spoke chidingly to his nephew Mordred, who, sour and dark of face, looked craftily at the faces of his uncle and his knights. And the chiefs with Mordred, men for the most part of violent and ambitious natures, looked haughtily at King Arthur's party. Nevertheless, there was no bad blood shown, and the talk was continued, and Mordred repeated the demands which the bishops had made. "But I care not to give thee Kent and London," said the king. "I tell thee frankly, Mordred, I would not trust thee there. I fear me thou wouldst try some crafty plot with the Saxon pagans if I gave them thee, as that rebel Caros did, who for a time made himself emperor of the Romans here in this land." "Ah, done then, my father," said Gorfelt, the son of Mordred, an insolent young man. "Let us cease this. I doubt not we be big enough to get all the kingdom if we fight." The king looked sternly at the young man, and there was silence among them, as all men waited for Arthur's reply. Then it happened that a young chieftain, standing near the king, felt something bite his foot where the low leathern shoe left it naked. He looked down and saw that he was treading on a viper which had struck him and was about to strike again. With a cry, the knight stepped aside, drew his sword and cut the reptile in two. As the blade flashed silvery bright in the sunlight, a great hoarse cry rose like thunder from the two masses of men watching them on either side. Trumpets blared and horns squealed, and shouts of command rose sharp and keen. Instantly the men standing with Arthur and Mordred looked about them, saw where the young chieftain stood with drawn sword, and knew that now nothing could avert the battle. "The gods will have it so," sneered Mordred. Already the earth trembled and shook with the beat of 10,000 feet of the armies rushing together. A knight of Mordred's, drawing his sword, thrust it into the breast of one of Arthur's chieftains with the cry, "This for thy land, Sir Dijon, that marches with mine." Instantly others fell to fighting hand to hand, striking on targe and helm. But Sir Owen, Sir Kay and Sir Bedevere surrounded the king, and all hurried back to the army approaching them. So likewise did Sir Mordred. Then came the crash of battle, as line on line with flashing swords held high, the ranks of war closed. Blades rose again, stained red. Fierce strangled cries came from men in the death grips. Helms were cracked, shields riven, dirks sank home, and men who had once drunk and jested with laughing looks over the same mead board now met fierce eye to eye, and never parted until one or both fell in the swaths of the death harvest. All day the stubborn battle raged, and ever the king sought out the rebel Mordred, but never reached him. Many valiant deeds he did, wielding his sword Excalibur, and by his side were Owen and Kay, Lucan and Bedevere. So spent were they at the last hardly could they lift their swords, and so sick of the slaying were they that gladly would they have ceased. but ever some vicious band of Mordred's knights would come upon them, and then they quitted them like men, and ceased not till their enemies had fled or were slain. Suddenly the king came to himself, and standing still looked upon the field. In the morning it had been but a bare hillside of hungry, stunted grass, through which the stones showed grey and sallow, like ancient bones. Now, in the low light of the sinking orb, it was red with the pallid faces of the dead stained a lighter red in the rays of the sun. Here and there bands still fought together, cries of fury rose, and the groans of the dying mingled with them. "Alas!" cried the king, and looked behind him. "Where are all my noble knights?" There were but two with him now, Lucan and his brother Bedivere. "Where is Owen and Kay?" he asked. "Alas, lord," said Sir Bedivere, "Sir Owen got his death wound by the thorn where we fought those 5 nights but now, and Sir Kay suddenly fell as he walked, and when I knelt to speak to him I found him dead." "Alas," said the king, "that ever I should see this doleful day, for now is my end come. But would to heaven that I wist where is that traitor Mordred, that hath caused this sorrow and ruin." Then, as he spoke, he looked towards the east, and saw where, by a tall standing stone, a man leaned as if spent with the wound, and he was aware that this was Mordred. "Now give me my spear," said the king to Sir Lucan, "for yonder is the traitor, and he shall not escape me." "Lord," said Sir Lucan in a weak voice, "let him bide, for he hath none with him, while we 3 are still alive." "Now betide me death, betide me life," said the king. "Now that I see him yonder, I will slay the serpent, lest he live to work more havoc on this my poor kingdom." "God speed you well," said Sir Bedivere, and gave the king his spear. Then the king ran towards Sir Mordred, crying, "Traitor, prepare, now is thy death day come." When Sir Mordred heard King Arthur, he raised his head, then came towards the king with his sword in his hand. And there, in the shadow of the great stone, King Arthur smote Sir Mordred under the shield with so keen a stroke of his spear that it went through the body and out beyond. Sir Mordred, feeling that death was upon him, thrust himself along the spear, almost to the butt thereof, nigh where King Arthur held it, and grasping his sword in both hands, he struck his uncle on the side of the head with so keen and fierce a blow that the sword pierced the helm and the skull. With that stroke Sir Mordred fell stark and dead to the earth, and the king sank in a swoon upon his body. Then Sir Bedivere and Sir Lucan, who were both sore wounded and weakly, came up, and between them, with many rests upon the way, took the king to a little coombe beside the waters, and there they took off his helm and bathed his wound and bound it, after which the king felt easier. "We may do naught else with thee here, lord," said Sir Lucan, "and it were best that we got thee to some town." "It would be better so," said the king, "but I fear me I have my death wound." When they had rested, Sir Lucan tried to rise so as to take up the king. "I may not rise," he cried, his hands upon his head, "my brain works so." Nevertheless, the knight staggered to his feet and lifted up the feet of the king, but the effort was too much for him, and with a deathly groan he fell to the ground, and when he had twitched and struggled a little, he lay dead. "Alas," said the king, "this is to me a full heavy sight, to see this noble knight so die for my sake. He would not complain, so set was he to help me, and now his heart has broken." Then Sir Bedivere went to his brother and kissed him, and closed his eyes. "Now," said the king, "come hither to me, Bedivere, for my time goeth fast, and I remember me of a promise." Therefore he bade Sir Bedivere, "Do thou take Excalibur, my good sword, and go with it beyond the coombe side, where a low thorn grows. And when thou comest there, I charge thee, throw my sword in that water, and come again and tell me what thou seest." So Sir Bedivere departed with the sword, and on the way he looked at the sword and saw how noble was the blade and how shining, and how the pommel and haft were full of precious stones. "If I throw this sword into the water," said Sir Bedivere to himself, "how great a sin 'twould be to waste so noble a weapon." Therefore he hid it in the branches of the thorn and returned to the king. "What sawest thou?" asked the king when Bedivere returned. "Sir," he said, "I saw the wind beat on the waves." "Ye have not done as I bid thee," said the king. "Now therefore do thou go again and do as I bid thee, and as thou art dear to me, spare it not, but throw it in." Then Sir Bedevere went back and took the sword in his hand, but again he could not bring himself to throw away that noble sword. So again he hid the sword and went back to the king. "What sawest thou this time?" said the king. "Lord," said Bedevere, "I saw the waters ebb and flow, and the sedges trembling." "Ah, traitor untrue," said the king, deep sorrow in his voice. "Who would have weened that thou, who hast been so true and dear to me, and who hast been named a noble knight, would betray me for the jewels on a sword? Now go ye again, I charge thee, and as thou shalt answer for thy sins at the last day, throw ye the sword far into the waters." Then in heavy mood Sir Bedevere went the third time, and took the sword from its hiding place, and looking away from the weapon lest its beauty should soften him, he bound the girdle about the hilt. Then he threw the sword with all his might far out over the water. As he looked, inwardly lamenting, he saw the jewels flash in the low light as the sword passed through the air. Then suddenly, when it neared the water, he marvelled to see a great arm and hand come up through the waves. The hand caught the weapon by the haft, shook it and brandished it thrice, then vanished with the sword under the waves. With some fear in his heart, Sir Bedevere went back to the king and told him all that he had seen. "It is well," said the king. "Now I have performed my promise. Help me hence to some village, for I am cold and would die beneath a roof if I may." Then Sir Bedevere took the king upon his back, thinking that he would find some road in a little while which would lead them to a hamlet. And as he went along he passed by the waterside, near the low thorn whence he had thrown the sword into the water. There in the sedges he marvelled to see a barge draped all in black cloth, and in it sat many fair ladies, all with black hoods on. When they saw Sir Bedevere with the king upon his back, they shrieked and wept. And one that looked a queen, so fair and stately, yet so sad was she, held out her arms towards the king, and cried unto him in a voice wondrous sweet, "Come to me, brother." "Put me into the barge," said the king to Bedevere, "for there I shall have rest." Softly did Sir Bedevere lay him in the barge, and the fair ladies wept over the king with much mourning. And one laid his head in her lap and caressed it with soft hands. Then, without sails or oars, the barge went from the shore, and fear and sorrow shook the soul of Sir Bedevere to see them go from him. "Alas, my lord Arthur," he cried, "what shall become of me if ye are leaving me lonely?" "Comfort thyself," said the king in a faint voice, "and do as well as thou mayest, for in me ye may no longer trust. For I will go into the Vale of Avalon to heal me of my grievous wound, and if thou hear never more of me, pray for my soul." Sir Bedevere stood watching till the barge went from his sight in the midst of evening, and then he wept a little, and so fared forward through the night, weeping as he thought how all the glory that was Arthur's was now past, and how he himself was very old and very lonely. When morning broke, he was aware of a little chapel and a hermitage between two hoar woods upon a knoll beside the marshes, and entering therein he got cheer of the holy hermit and rested. Now when King Arthur had gone westwards to collect his host, Sir Owen, marvelling that Sir Lancelot had sent no word in reply to the letter of Sir Gawaine, had charged a trusty squire of his to go across to Brittany and to tell Sir Lancelot of all that had passed, and how King Arthur longed for his aid and his love. Nigh mad with grief was Sir Lancelot when he had learned all, and so deep was his sorrow and so wild was his regret that hardly could he wait till the ships were ready to take him and his knights and army across to Britain. When they arrived at Dover, Sir Lancelot sought out the tomb of Sir Gawaine, and there with much weeping he prayed long and earnestly for the repose of the soul of that dead warrior, his once dear friend. And all the other knights prayed likewise for the soul of Gawaine, and Sir Lancelot gave 100 pounds for masses to be said, and the others gave according to their means. Then word was brought to him of the day-long dreadful battle in the west, and how King Arthur was gone, mortally wounded, none knew whither, and how all the knights of the Round Table were dead. Silent was Sir Lancelot at this news, but men saw how his stern face paled. and for a time he walked apart and would suffer none to speak to him. Then he came to his knights, and all could see how his looks had changed. Grief was deeply lined upon his face, and he had the air of an aged and weary man. "My fair lords," he said, "I thank you all for your coming with me, but we came too late. But now I go alone to find the body of my dear lord, and if I may, I will see my lady, Queen Guinevere. And do ye all go back to your country, for now we have no place in this." Thus Sir Lancelot fared forth, and would suffer none to go with him. First he went to Amesbury, and in the convent there he saw Queen Guinevere. Few but very sad were the words they spake. Sir Lancelot offered to give her a home in Brittany, away from the trouble and the ruin of the land, but she would not. "My lord is dead," she said, weeping, "and this dear kingdom may not long stand, but while I live I will stay on its dear soil." Then Sir Lancelot fared far west through the wastelands, and came to the battlefield, and there he wept sorely to see the long lines of dead. Many were the dead knights of the Round Table who he found unburied, and these with his own hands he laid in the grave, and he procured a priest to say prayers over them. Further he went beside the shores of the endless waters, until one day he found a black barge, and stepping therein was taken without sail or oars
far over the wide sea until the twilight.
And then, raising his sorrowing eyes, he was aware of a fair green island with a valley between two sweet hills, and there was a chapel, and all about it were trees laden with blossoms. A little bell began to ring just as the barge lightly touched the shore, and stepping therefrom, Sir Lancelot went into the chapel and heard mass. Afterwards a bishop came unto him where he kneeled, and a hermit, and the latter seized his hand. And when he looked up, Sir Lancelot knew it for Sir Bedevere. Neither could speak for the great tears that rolled down their grim faces. But Sir Bedevere drew him forth and led him to where a great white marble slab was lying, freshly cut, in the midmost part of the chapel. Thereon Sir Lancelot saw the words, cut deep and wide in black letters: Hic jacet Arthurus Rex, quondam Rex Q futurus. Then did Sir Lancelot's heart almost burst with sorrow, and when he had finished praying and weeping, he kneeled unto the bishop and prayed him to shrive him and assoil him. Afterwards he besought him that he might live with him, and the holy man granted his request. And there ever after did Sir Lancelot, putting off all the fame and glory which he had gotten in the world, pass his days and nights, serving God with prayers and fastings and much abstinence. When within a year Queen Guinevere died in her cell at Amesbury, Sir Lancelot, having been advised in a dream of her death, braved the bands of lawless men that now ravaged the fair land of Britain, and brought her body to the Isle of Glastonbury. He laid it solemnly beside the body of her dear lord Arthur, and thereafter he endured greater penance. For, said he, by my stiff-necked pride did all this evil come. If I had gone straightway to my dear lord, and cast myself upon his love and justice, my lady the queen would not have been led to the stake, and I should not unwittingly have slain young Gareth. I am the causer of all the ruin and sorrow that hath come upon this land, and never while I live may I forgive me. Thus evermore he prayed and mourned, day and night, but sometimes he slumbered a broken sleep. He ate but little, and neither the bishop nor Sir Bedevere could make him take comfort. And if you would know the time and place where Lancelot was happiest, it was when he was lying on the tomb of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. At last, on a sweet morn in June, they found him lying there, stark dead, but with a gentle smile upon his wasted face. And when they had made the mass of requiem, they laid him in the tomb at the feet of the king and the queen. And on the slab that covered him they caused these words to be graven: Here lieth Sir Lancelot du Lake, who was chief of all Christian knights, the most courteous man and the truest friend, the meekest doer of great deeds, and the gentlest to all ladies and weak creatures. R.I.P. End of chapter 13. Recording by Peter Keeble, Nottingham, United Kingdom. End of King Arthur's Knights. The Tales Retold for Boys and Girls by Henry Gilbert.